Okay. This is a meeting of the San Mateo Union High School District Board of Trustees. I'm calling open session to order. Today is November 21st, and it is now 7:02 p.m. I will begin with the roll call. Trustee Griffin.
Present.
Trustee Chavez.
Present.
Trustee Jacobson.
Present.
Trustee Land.
Present.
And I am present. Tonight, we have a team from Hannah Interpreting as our Spanish interpreters. For those who would like to attend the meeting virtually in Spanish, that option is available. Hannah Interpreting, would you please communicate that for us this evening? Thank you.
Absolutely. Good afternoon. In order to provide language access, this meeting will have simultaneous bidirectional interpretation into English and Spanish. If you're bilingual, you don't have to click anything. But if you're not bilingual and you're using your laptop, in a few seconds, you'll see an icon shaped like a globe at the bottom of your screen. Click on Language Interpretation and then select English. If you're using your phone or an iPad, then locate the three-dot menu in one of the corners of your screen. Click on Language Interpretation and then select English. When you speak, do so at a moderate pace because the interpreters are going to be simultaneously interpreting everything you say. A efecto de proporcionar acceso lingüístico, contaremos con interpretación bidireccional simultánea al inglés y al español. Si usted es bilingüe, no tiene que presionar nada, pero si usted no es bilingüe y está en su computadora, en unos segundos verá un icono en forma de globo en la parte inferior de su pantalla. Haga clic en Interpretación de idiomas y después seleccione Español o Spanish. Si está usando su iPad o su teléfono, entonces busca el menú de 3 puntos o que dice More en una de las esquinas de su pantalla, haga clic en Interpretación de idiomas y después seleccione Español o Spanish y después Aceptar, Finalizar o Done. Si habla, hágalo en español y las intérpretes estarán simultáneamente interpretando todo lo que usted diga. Gracias. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. If you wish to view closed captions of this meeting, please view the meeting on the SMUHSD board meeting YouTube channel. The link to the YouTube channel can be found on our website. You may view the captions in English as we live stream our meeting tonight, and you may view the captions in a variety of other languages if you choose to watch this after the meeting has ended. Viewers may request additional accommodations by calling 558-2201. For our deaf and hard of hearing community, we have a team from Hannah Interpreting Services, and they will be interpreting our meeting this evening. We would like to ask everyone to please remember to speak at a clear and reasonable pace for our interpreters. Thank you. Okay, we'll now have our student board representatives lead us with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll go on to report of actions taken in closed session. The Board of Trustees took the following actions during closed session. Upon the motion of Trustee Land and seconded by Trustee Jacobson, the board approved the stipulated expulsion case 24-25-7 with a vote of 4-0. The votes were as follows. Trustee Griffin was absent. Trustee Chavez voted yes. Trustee Jacobson voted yes. Trustee Land voted yes, and I voted yes. Upon the motion of Trustee Land and seconded by myself, Trustee Andrade Zuniga, the board approved the resignation of social science teacher with a vote of 4-0. The votes were as follows. Trustee Griffin was absent. Trustee Chavez was yes. Trustee Jacobson was yes. Trustee Land was yes, and I voted yes. Okay, we'll go on to adopting the agenda. The Board of Trustees may either adopt the agenda as presented or make a change to the agenda through a motion, a second, and a majority vote. The Brown Act prohibits any additions to the agenda without a 72-hour public notice for regularly scheduled board meetings. Are there any questions or comments from the board, student board reps as well, or the superintendent in respect to the agenda? No? Okay. Are there any questions or comments from the public, either in person or virtual?
There are none.
Thank you. Okay, I would like a motion.
I move to approve the agenda.
I
Second.
Okay. Motion by trustee Jacobson, second by trustee Chavez. Student board reps, how do you vote?
Approved.
Great. Thank you. Okay. And now trustee Griffin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Trustee Land,
Aye.
trustee Jacobson,
Aye.
trustee Chavez.
Aye.
And I vote yes. So the motion passes. Thank you. Public comments. If you are joining us in person and wish to make a comment about an agenda item or during the public comments section at the beginning of the agenda, please fill out a request to address the board form and submit it to the secretary. This form should be given to the secretary before the agenda item begins. If you are joining us virtually, use the raise hand feature on Zoom to be recognized. When invited to do so, your camera must be on before you are called upon to make a public comment. We will call on you to begin your comment once we have promoted you into the meeting. If your camera is not operational, please email your comments to the Board of Trustees at board, BOARD, at SMUHSD.org. Please note that comments are limited to 3 minutes. The board president may increase or decrease the time allowed for public comment. It depends on the topic and the number of persons wishing to be heard. I will call on in-person comment requests first. Ms. Aquino, are there any in-person comments?
There are no requests.
Thank you. How about virtually?
There are no requests.
Okay, thank you. All right, we will move on to governing board comments. We will begin with our student board representatives. If you all want to give your comment now, please.
So I'll be delivering a report on the recent Let's Talk event. So for the first half of the discussion, we listened to the adults share their perspectives, and it was very eye-opening. It allowed us to step into their shoes and understand the thought processes behind their decisions. Hearing their stories and experiences gave us a new appreciation for the challenges they face and the effort they put into shaping environments that impact us. And for the second half, where we as students were able to share our own experiences, we felt incredibly refreshed. It created a space where our voices were not only heard, but valued. Being able to speak openly about our perspectives without the pressure of adult judgment fostered a sense of mutual respect and collaboration that I believe was essential for a meaningful exchange. So I thank everyone here and those of you who aren't here for attending.
Locally at Mills High School, we've just wrapped up our fall play, the one-act play that goes wrong in Steel Magnolias. Additionally, on Monday, we had an sustainability assembly, and this Friday, we'll be hosting a film festival. At the previous San Mateo Union High School District Board Council meeting, all student representatives got together to learn the basics of Robert's 7 Rules of Order to understand board vocabulary. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Great report. Okay, we will go on to the rest of the board. Trustee Griffin, do you have a report out? Or excuse me, do you have any comments?
I just have one quick comment, and I attended the Little Big game and sat on the victorious side for 2 years in a row. So but my heart does go out to Burlingame because I felt kind of sorry for him. Anyway, I enjoyed the game. It's actually a really fun experience, and people are far more friendly and collegial at the game than I remember from my high school days. But it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to see everybody. Seriously. I mean,
Yep.
Even though it's a rivalry, I've got friends I got to go find on the Burlingame side, and I saw a lot of people that were just socializing. There was a good contest there, and I enjoyed it immensely.
Thank you. Trustee Land.
Well, I'll tag along because I was at the Little Big Game as well, but on the other side. But what I found fascinating, well, one, I totally agree. It is such great energy to get the two high schools together. The rivalry is such a great rivalry in some ways. Both principals I got to hang out with for a little bit, which was great. Um, what I noticed was a lot of my students from BIS were there with their families So Dr. Fong, I'm just letting you know they were okay. Um, and got to see some of my former students, one of which was the Panther, which I thought was great because he got out of the costume and it was like, "Hey, Mr. Lynn, you're not supposed to know, but I was the Panther." I'm like, "That's cool. That's cool." So I really just it felt like really great community. And so I'm glad I got to go. Didn't see Bob there, but he was on the other side.
Aw,
Anyway.
yeah. Oh, thank you. Okay, anybody else?
This is the interpreter. Can you hear me?
Yes.
The Spanish interpreter has their hand raised. I don't know if there's an issue on their side.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, I don't see them anymore. Oh, maybe they dropped
Dropped.
off. But what? Oh, it's
Oh, it's
good.
better.
Okay,
Okay.
great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Trustee Chavez.
Oh, yes. I'll just make mine brief. I wanted to also talk about the Let's Talk, and I want to just say we had amazing participation from all of our students. I want to thank all of our wonderful students that participated. The second half, I appreciate you saying the first half was great. I think my favorite part was the second half, and we had, I would say we had at least 15, 20 students participating. It was awesome. It was amazing, and I want to thank everybody for participating. That was really wonderful. The other thing I wanted to mention was trustees in San Mateo County, we're always invited to San Mateo County School Board Association quarterly meeting / dinner. And so we just had one this week. And I just wanted to give a shout out because we had presenters, Jefferson Union High School District, trustee Kalima and Andy. They were reporting on the workforce housing program and the positive impact that has on recruitment and retention. And then we had Carmen French, she works for the County Office of Ed, and I didn't know about this, but she talked a lot about the teacher residency program, and we have somebody participating from our school district. So a lot of school districts in the county participate in that, so that was great. And then we had a third section, the Ravenswood School District Superintendent Gina Sudaria was discussing the career ladder, recruitment, and retaining programs. And I just thought it was really a great time for all trustees who were invited. We had a great time in talking about those, and I thought that was really great. I always learn a lot about the workforce housing every time, all the meetings I go to that include that. So that's my report out. And I want to thank our board reps here. You guys are wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else?
I meant student board reps. Sorry.
It's okay. Anybody else? All right, Trustee Jacobs.
I'll just add my remarks about Let's Talk. I wanted to thank the students for coming out and for sharing your voices, and it was really great. I also want to compliment Randall for facilitating the meeting and preparing such a warm and inviting space for people to talk and for the students to feel they could share openly. It was, my only regret is that we didn't have more adults there to hear them. I also just wanted to acknowledge the passing of Quinlan Thomas White he was a senior at Hillsdale High School. Really sad that he passed away unexpectedly just a couple days after his 18th birthday. He lives just down the block from me, and there were many, many Hillsdale students who came by, dropped off flowers. There was an overwhelming show of support from the Hillsdale community. I also attended the funeral mass at St. Gregory's Catholic Church in San Mateo, and it was standing room only. There was such an outpouring of love and support for the family, and I just wanted to thank Hillsdale for that. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'll go on to, are there any other comments? No? Okay. I'll go on to my comments. I wanted to start with our land acknowledgement that the students from Cappuccino had developed a couple years ago. It says our community acknowledges that all of our campuses lie on the ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone. The Ramaytush are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula, whose land was stolen from them and whose native language was lost because of Spanish colonization. As settlers on the stolen land of the peninsula, we should be, alongside the Ramaytush, remembering and honoring their ancestors and relatives. We thank the first people, the Ramaytush Ohlone, for taking care of the land we use now for education and activities. Our responsibility of caring for the earth is unique and personal to each of us, but should be rooted in allyship with the Ramaytush Ohlone, so we can work together to protect and preserve the land for future generations. And this was specifically important because during our little break, our 3-week break from having a meeting, we had Dia de los Muertos. It was November 2nd, and it starts November 1st, November 2nd, and then folks can continue on if they like. In San Francisco, they did this huge like procession, and there were altars at the cultural center, and it just reminded me of our different communities, and it made me think about the students that we have lost in the past year and the past years that I've been on the board. Recently, one of our previous students died by suicide, and it makes me think about how mental health services are so important, how important our wellness counselors are, how important our mental health counselors are, and just being there for one another in community. It's so important. Just like Trustee Jacobson was saying about the outpour of love that was given to the student from Hillsdale. This is what makes community, and this is what makes our district so awesome, is that we are there for each other. So I wanted to acknowledge that. I attended the California Association for Black School Educators Conference in San Diego at the beginning of the month. And there were so many great speakers, and there was a lot of really good information. One of the takeaways I got, and I have some other to share, but later when there's a presentation that one of our educators is going to give, and so I wanted to also include some notes there. But somebody said that education gives people hope. Education was their hope. Education gave them a vision. And the way that we teach our students and the way that our classrooms are, the way that the spaces in our classrooms and community is where we can see the future of our democracy. So I thought that was really important because, I mean, not just we just had an election, but also because we are here for the students, student achievement, student progression, like all your futures are why we're here. And so it's just the conference really brought me back to the purpose of why I'm on the school board. And so it helped me do a lot of reflecting. Our Equity Advisory Committee always needs folks to participate. So please help us, come and join us. Dr. Kemke and Dr. Simmons, they are excellent at running the group. So we need folks there. Let's Talk was awesome. I also want to acknowledge Miss Aquino and her team for always just providing a flawless setup. And also Superintendent Booker for his words and for our students to be so bold. I think we have amazing young people in our district, and we really should listen to them and understand what their perspectives are, because that's really, again, our purpose. Yeah, and so that's all. Oh, one last thing. The County Committee on School District Organization, governing board, we had our meeting this past 2 weeks ago on a Monday, and I didn't realize how many people don't know anything about that committee or what it's about. So if anybody, wants to learn more about it, you can reach out to me, or you can reach out to anybody that is a member. We all have representatives from each school board. So please, like, if there's anything you need, these are great places for you to come and advocate. So yes, you're totally welcome to come. All right, so I will go on. Yeah, thank you. Okay, that's okay. Thank you. All right, we'll go on to communications of the Board of Trustees. Superintendent Booker, are there any communications for the board?
Yes, we have one. So we received a letter from the San Mateo County Office of Education with regard to the 2023-2024 unaudited actuals financial reports for Design Tech High School, which is one of our charter schools. And everything checked out, but we received this from the county office.
Thank you. And there are no actions, right?
No actions.
Thank you. Okay, any recognitions?
Not this evening.
Okay, we'll go on to the consent agenda. Does anybody want to pull any of the items? Any trustees or any student board reps want to pull any of the items on the consent agenda? Okay. Okay. With that said, I don't see anybody, so I can entertain a motion.
I move that we accept the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by trustee Land and a second by trustee Chavez. Student board representatives, how do you vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Trustee Griffin,
Yes.
trustee Land,
Yes.
trustee Chavez,
Yes.
trustee Jacobson,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Motion passes. Okay, we'll go on to regular reports. Report of the superintendent.
Thank you very much. So a few things tonight that I want to bring attention to the board and the public. This month, we awarded our golden apples to deserving employees who go above and beyond to show exemplary service, dedication, and resourcefulness, among many other positive qualities. This was truly a highlight of my month, and I want to first recognize our classified golden apple who went to Liliana Garcia. She is our staff assistant at the Bridge Academy, and it was a real pleasure giving her the award today with her team. She's a graduate of our district. She was hired 4 years ago. Prior to that, she volunteered in our district 7 years ago as an instructional aide in our EL summer school. Here's what Principal Samia Showman had to say about her. Lily knows what staff and students need before we even get a chance to tell or ask her. She greets everyone with a smile and exudes warmth. She is the students and staff go-to. Miss Lily, is a popular phrase when they come into the Bridge office looking for her and do not see her. She makes sure to keep everything running at our school, pitches in to support all of us, and understands deeply what it means to be student-centered. Huge congratulations to Liliana. And Jewel Wally is the recipient of our certificated Golden Apple this month. She's a special education teacher at Cappuccino High School who's been with the district for 30 years. Here's what a few of her colleagues had to say about her. Ophelia Angulo said, Jewel has dedicated over 30 years of commitment to bettering the lives of her students. Her compassion and dedication in enriching students' experience in school is commendable. Jewel also mentors the young new educators that cross her path. I feel privileged to work with her every day. And Eli Poblet said, Jewel exemplifies what it means to be an advocate, a leader, and a dedicated professional who is deeply committed to the success and well-being of her students. Jewel is a tireless advocate for her students, always going above and beyond to ensure that their needs are met, not only in the classroom, but in every aspect of their lives. And she consistently works to ensure that each student has access to the best vocational services and support, empowering them to reach their full potential. So again, huge congratulations to Jewel. And then lastly, I want to acknowledge that the California Dashboard of Academic Social Progress came out. It's published. You can go onto the California Department of Education's website. We'll be giving a much more detailed analysis and report in a future board meeting, but I want to share some good news and some areas where we need to continue to grow. Our graduation rate, which is a huge focus for me, we had a slight increase. We're at 92.47% last year. Our ML students, our multilingual learner students, they're now split into two categories, long-term English learner and English learner, and we saw some significant increases in these subgroup rates. Our EL students increased to 74.5% graduation, and our long-term English learner at 88.8%. College and career indicator grew by 4 percentage points to 65.9%, and our EL progress, this is based on the LPAC annual assessment, is at 37.7%. Our suspension rate went down by 2.4%, which is a real positive move for us. We're at 3.3% of students. And our academic indicator, as we indicated a couple of board meetings ago, we have work there in both English language arts and our mathematics results. We have a lot of work to do there. So I just wanted to call out a few bullet points there, let the public know that they can access the dashboard online, and we'll be coming back to the board in a future board meeting to give fuller detail. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go on to report of the District Teachers Association.
Sorry, guys, caught me off guard. Good evening, President Andrade Zuniga, members of the district board and district cabinet. First, I'd like to just thank Superintendent Booker for his message to the community and to staff regarding support for students and families and educators in this post-election environment. The words and the sentiment that he shared, I think, were not only appropriate but needed, considering the many families and students who are experiencing uncertainty and well, flat out fear with respect to some of the extreme rhetoric by some of the members of the new presidential administration. So I want to commend Dr. Booker for reminding the community that of our role, of who we are as a district, and how we can best support and serve the students and families of this community. So thank you very much. With that said, the last time we spoke, it was, of course, prior to the election, and many of us have been suggesting that we all get out and vote and do our best to make our voices heard and provide input on the next steps for the next administration. That clearly has happened, and we are in a transition phase at this point. I know there are going to be some challenging times, especially with some of the statements regarding the Department of Education and some situations in which we may have to rethink or reevaluate how we do things in our district. And I hope that I know that the collaborative relationship that we have with our district, that we will accept and meet those challenges collaboratively with the best interests of the students in mind. And yeah, looking forward to the holidays. October's a long month. We're almost out of November, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Going on to report of the CSCA Chapter 519 rep.
They're not available this evening.
Okay, thank you. Report of the San Mateo Adult School Teachers Association.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Thank you, Board President Zuniga, VP Griffin, board members, and Superintendent Booker for the opportunity to speak. We, the CFT Union and staff of San Mateo Adult and Career Education Campus, want to share updates from our campus. And the first area that I want to mention is our continued collaboration in hosting successful resume and interview workshops. On October 29th, SMACE, in partnership with NovaWorks Employment and Training Agency and San Francisco International Airport Business and Career Center, hosted a resume and interview workshop. The event, open to SMACE students and community members, drew 35 enthusiastic participants. The workshop provided attendees with valuable tools and insights to enhance their job search. Participants had the opportunity to sharpen their resume writing skills, practice interview techniques, and gain knowledge about job opportunities at San Francisco Airport. The workshop was a resounding success, empowering participants to take the next step in their career journeys. We're also making a transition with ESL. Each semester, all of our ESL students are required to take 2 standardized reading comprehension tests based on the English language proficiency standards. Typically, CASAS testing, Comprehensive Adult Student Assessment System, is conducted in one of our computer labs. With over 50 ESL classes, this process usually takes 4 to 5 weeks to complete. However, this month we transitioned to in-classroom testing. Students took their tests on Dell laptops that were donated post-pandemic from the district high schools. All of our instructors became certified CASAS proctors, and with the assistance of over 20 student ambassadors, we were able to reduce the cycle to less than 2 weeks. A significant advantage of this compressed schedule is more instructional hours between tests, leading to greater likelihood of learning and more accurate assessment of student skills. I also want to give a heartfelt thank you to some of the people. September and October have been incredibly busy months, filled with fantastic events. We want to extend our sincere gratitude to everyone who contributed to the success of SMACE. Your dedication and hard work have truly cultivated a wonderful community spirit. Special thanks to Mary Wang for her reliable photography skills, Anthony for his invaluable support, Tommy, Eddie, and Oliver for their helpful assistance. And some event highlights that I'd like to mention. In our Hispanic Heritage Month from September 15th to October 15th, I'd like to thank Monica, Wellness Coordinator, and Sandy, the ESL instructor, for their initiative. We had Cora presentations on October 4th, 17th, and the 23rd. These presentations were attended by an impressive 530 students and 27 staff members. For the Breast Cancer Awareness Month, we'd like to thank Anthony, who is in our security, and Kira, who is the Assistant Director, for their inspiring contributions. We also had a SMACE Halloween event on October 31st, and we'd like to thank Stephanie for providing fantastic pumpkins and music. Once again, thank you to everyone for making these events a success, and a big thanks to Marina Kravtsova, our Student Success Coordinator, and Patricia Villar, our Transition Navigator, for organizing our amazing events. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go on to special reports and appearances. Superintendent Booker, are there any special reports and appearances?
Absolutely. Double special. This is our spotlight on student learning, student discipline, and attendance data that we present annually. But before we begin, I just want to acknowledge Don Scatena here, our Director of Student Services, our Principal of Middle College. This will be his last SMUHSD school board meeting. As he transitions to become the Deputy Superintendent at the Burlingame School District. We want to wish him just the best. And I personally want to thank you so much. I've only gotten to work with you for 2.5 years, but you are so invaluable. It's going to be a really tremendous loss for us. I really mean that. And at the same time, I'm so happy for you, and just congratulations on your new role. It's going to benefit us because he's going to be supporting Burlingame students as they transition to us. Don has been with us for 17 years in a variety of capacities. And I just want to extend a huge thanks and a huge congratulations to you as you move on to your next role. So thank you very, very much. Yeah. 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 Is your mic on? I want to make sure your mic's on. There
It
you
is
go.
now.
Yeah.
It is now. Thanks. And yeah, it's been amazing. 17 years. Let's see, my first month on the job. Let's see. I was doing, I remember getting a call. I was doing registration of freshmen at San Mateo High School. I was a new first year assistant principal and getting a call that my wife went into labor.
Wow.
And telling Yvonne, who just was appointed principal like a week before, that I needed to go, but this was sort of planned, sort of. And she's now a junior at Burlingame High School, and we chose this district for our students, and really took that to heart all these years, thinking that all these kids are really my kids. So always, when I think of student services, my staff will always say we always put service first, and so that's what we use when we are working with families in the department. And so it's been a great ride, a lot of wonderful experience, and happy for everything that the district's provided to me and that I've been able to help with along the way. So thank you. Okay, so discipline enrollment. Attendance is also in intra-district transfer. So attendance will be found in this presentation quite a bit. We recently had a couple reports from our company that works with us, and I'd like to share that with the board too. And you have the expanded report in the board memo. And so the first suspension rates. Again, this is an annual report that we do every year. And so we do look at now suspension data. We don't just put it away. It's something that site administrators look at regularly. They have a data dashboard. They can pull up their current suspension rates up to the day of. And so whenever we give this sort of snapshot of annual review, we are looking at that daily. It's not something that we take lightly. It's very important to us to know. And so the first slide is just showing you the trend data, and you can see that as a district we've sort of plateaued a little bit. About, even though we have tons of alternatives, and we'll talk about that we sort of hit a bit of a plateau. That means basically the behaviors are probably pretty similar that we see from year to year. We have a lot of similar strategies. The sites are very much a restorative mindset. When you're talking to administrators, that's taken some years to get us to that point, and it's great to see. For this slide, it's really important just to look at from 21, 22 on. We know what happened in 2021. COVID, that was distance learning. The year before, about a third of the school year was offset by the data, but it's still here. But you could really just look 21, 22 onward. You could see that instructional time lost, even though suspension rates has ticked up just slightly, you can see that the instructional time lost has actually gone down. And that shows that a lot of our alternatives and alternative work is actually taking root. So reducing suspension days, things of that nature. And we'll see that data later. Although we hold ourselves to a high standard, our suspension rate is a much better rate comparatively to the rest of the states and compared to the rest of the county. So we do very well in this area, but we do have some areas to grow. One area that continues to sort of perplex us and as a district is the types of suspensions. A few things to recognize here. There are some things that you can suspend on a first offense, meaning the first time a student does something. Those are usually some act of violence, whether it's a fight or an assault, something like that, or something related to substances like drug use or drug possession, or weapons. Those are really the only things you can suspend in a first offense. Otherwise, we're supposed to do other means of correction. We're supposed to try other alternatives, and that's what our sites generally do. So when you see a suspension for a nonviolent, it's because it's probably happened twice to the student. For the first offense, it cannot. So for example, theft is a great example. If a student is caught stealing something, it would have to be their second offense for them to be able to do a suspension. On the first offense, you have to actually show some form of alternative. And usually that's in a restorative practices or restorative meeting, something along those lines. But for this slide, I'd like to focus on sort of the almost 44% or over 44% of our students suspensions are due to some act of violence, whether it's force, violence, threat of violence, or an actual physical fight, an altercation, or a threat of a physical altercation. That continues to be, and last year, this is sort of a repeat of last year, continues to be sort of the two areas that we need to focus on the most, on how to sort, and that's about the climate, that's about the culture of the classroom and the campus, and how do students get along. And so that's an area of growth for us as an organization, in my opinion, and that's something that the schools still recognize, but it's very difficult when you have a fight in the quad and two students are in a physical altercation. Maybe they exchange something physical with one another. What do you do in that situation? It's really real difficult. We know that we want to do mediation. We know we want to talk through those incidents, but a lot of times administrators do have to sort of send students home in those instances, and that's reflected here in the data. I do want to point out they're 48,900K, so disruption and defiance, it's covered on the screen, but that area, that's about 7% under K. K is no longer a suspendable act per ed code. So we know that we're going to drop at least 7% of these acts by next year, because when this report comes out, because K cannot be, you cannot suspend for disruption and defiance any longer. You cannot send a student home because they disrupted a classroom. Teachers can still remove students though for defiance and disruption. That is, but they do have to show other means of correction. Suspensions by ethnicity. This is, again, another area of growth for us as an organization. You can see that students, Latinx students, Black students, Pacific Islander students, their statistics compared to the enrollment percentage is much higher. So a lot of times I would show this data and it would be almost 2x for Latinx. So it's a little lower than that. So we've improved a little bit over the last few years, but still an area of growth. And we, you know, so that means that you're more likely as a student, a Latinx student in our community, in our schools, to be suspended. You're more likely to be suspended by this rate, as you can see. Looking at discipline and expulsions, overall, it's still very low. I mean, six expulsions for a school district of 8,500 students is very low compared to the rest of the state. We have many alternatives. We do other means of correction, and when we expel a student, it's generally for serious offenses. So weapons, brandishing of a weapon, assault with serious injury. So it's not just, or it's like they actually went to the hospital or a concussion or something along those lines. And then one other expulsion last year was for sexual harassment. And so you can see these, but this is for 6 offenses, and those were all brought to you for approval last year. A highlight in some of the work that has continued to expand over the years is our alternative to suspension program. Now, we probably need to go and just call it alternative program instead of alternative suspension, because sometimes students are suspended and they get the alternatives because it's the educational piece of other means of correction. So a suspension by itself isn't normally enough to sort of change behavior. Some of our highlights, we have a substance use prevention program. We have a vaping prevention education program. Some of these things were shared probably last June with the mental health presentation by April Torres. And we have additional programs like bullying prevention, dehumanizing language that was piloted and is now in the fabric of our alternative program. Healthy relationships, so when there's sexual harassment or inappropriate language being used, or maybe it's a separated couple in a campus, and it's interfering in their schoolwork, things of that nature, healthy relationships used. And then we have the long-standing alternative to suspension, our first, the traditional, just educating students on making better choices. That's sort of where the program began. This entire program began probably 12 years ago as just an alternative to suspension. Instead of being suspended, you go to a classroom. It was at adult school for a long time. And that sort of evolved to be an online program or something that students do during flex period with our trained therapists. The most important part of this data is that you see that 75%, 77%, and 95%, depending on that alternative, do not reoffend. So they do not have another suspendable offense and do not reoffend in the same, a similar category. So really a highlight. Whenever you could hit 70% of anything in education, I'm like, 25% is fantastic. I mean, so when we say it's 70 to 80% of students are not reoffending for something that we educated them on, that's exceptional. It means they're not being suspended for a second offense. Okay, so in the area of attendance, we have been working with School Status, which is formerly A2A. It's a major company, a major player in attendance interventions, and we've been using them for 2.5 years now. We really are starting to see some amazing results from the work we're doing. So that's like our dashboard. That's sort of the manager of our data. And then we put the data in. We do the management piece of many of these things. So here's just information about how much we are communicating with our families at an exceedingly high level about students who are missing school, letter writing, communication via text and email. In addition, so over 30,000 notifications have gone out to our families about their students missing school and the importance of attending school. You can see that 79% of students do not move to the third letter of truancy. So almost 80% of the students do not progress. So you can see this trend of, okay, 80% are not moving on after you do an intervention like a meeting, a conference about attendance, and then you put interventions in place. 55% of excessive absence students do not move to letter 2. So these are fantastic numbers. This is showing that our attendance interventions are really taking root, and it's kudos to our social workers, to our site admin, the work that they're doing. Some other things to look at. Here's the entire 23-24 school year. You can see red is sort of a high volume day for absences. Now, these are also on Mondays, so they are going to be higher because we have multiple periods that day. So if students miss more individual periods, then it's going to be at a greater rate. But you can see the days that students miss the most: Thanksgiving, Monday, Tuesday of Thanksgiving week, a couple days before the final exams for the winter, right before winter recess. Those are all sort of somewhat outliers. And the last couple days of school are also high absent rate days, before 3-day weekends, things of that nature, you could say. And again, these are everything. This is excused absences, unexcused absences, truancies, all combined, showing that rate. So our students, 21%, are considered chronically absent. Again, this is a high number for us, but it's considered a very low number compared to the rest of the state. But just talking about ourselves, seeing the chronic number in 14%, and our excellent number, meaning missing less than 1% of the days in a school year, which means you're only missing about 1 day out of 180, means 13%. So that's pretty close to equal there. So both 67% of our students fall into the manageable or satisfactory. One goal for us, our social workers, our site administrators, our site teams, a focus is moving a student from severe to chronic into the chronic category, moving a chronic student into the manageable, because you rarely are going to be able to do an intervention that moves them completely from being chronic to excellent in a given year. You want to sort of nudge them year over year into the next category if you can. That's a good goal to have. It's rare to see a student go from being a chronically absent student to an excellent attendee in a given year. This is chronic rates by school. It's not a surprise. A few things to point out. Peninsula and Bridge are at the top. The numbers can be a little skewed, remembering that both schools don't have block schedules. So they offer all 5 periods in a day. So if a student misses, their rate's going to be a little higher than the other campuses. And Middle College at the bottom there. And that is only 3 periods of attendance. So you can see how that sort of also could skew the numbers. Attendance rates of chronically absent by ethnicity. You could see over a third of our Hispanic students fall into the chronically absent category. And so this is an area of growth, an area of focus. 2 of our 3 social workers are Spanish speaking, working closely with our SART teams, really important work. A continued area of growth, but still these are pretty good pieces of data, and we're showing much improvement. We did get the new report for up to November 4th of the fall, and do an amazing improvement year over year. So our 24-25 data is already showing mass improvement. By category, you could see multilingual learners, free reduced lunch students, homeless students, and special education students compared to the total students. And you can see all those categories are coming in the chronic numbers. Almost our ML is almost over twice the number of our total students. One focus is, as a homeless liaison that I am, and working with our team sites, when a student is categorized as a McKinney-Vento, some things like taxi service, things of that nature can really help, even if it's only for 2 or 3 weeks. And we use our grant funds to help fund this, and to send a taxi out, and for a period of time, helping get students to school. We see a lot of improvement. We know that if we could break a cycle of truancy, of absenteeism, that it helps for the long term. So getting a student re-engaged over a 3 to 4 week period of time with taxi service help. We don't do it for the entire year, but we do it for short periods of time to show some improvement. And you can see here by grade level, obviously almost twice as many chronically absent students are seniors as they are from freshman year. Has a lot to do with access, like cars, driving, being able to get off campus more readily, having reduced schedules, things of that nature really factor in to this number. But still, the blue line is the chronic rate of all the other districts that school status works with. So you can see how we do compared to the nation and compared to other California schools. This is a learning time lost, and it really, how many hours are being lost based on the chronic absenteeism that's going on compared to the non-chronic students. You could see that it's pretty significant. Interesting, though, that it's sort of a U shape from grade level to grade level. You would think that you'd see that maybe has a lot to do with seniors having a reduced day, maybe on a 5-period day. It would be a factor here instead of you see it at much higher. All right, so this is probably, for me, the most important slide of the presentation to illustrate how we are improving attendance using our social workers and doing school attendance, site attendance review teams. So we have a SARB process that's been recognized by the state as formally as a model SARB. So that's district level intervention. The The goal of SART is to push all those interventions to the site level so that they're having site team meetings, and all of our sites are having site team meetings. The importance of this slide is to illustrate that when we have a conference at the site about attendance, we see a 23% improvement of that attendance after the students have the conference. So interventions are going into place. Students are being signed up for tutoring. Students are being signed up maybe for a change of schedule, whatever it might be. Students are getting bus passes. We're getting obstacles out of their way for their attendance in these things. So 23%, very few things can show that we can do that would show a 23% improvement by having one meeting and intervention. I will point out that our current up-to-date data for November for this year is showing 79% improvement. And so the conferences are the key. Our administrators are hearing that. Our site teams are hearing that the conference, it's difficult to get everyone in the room, a school psychologist potentially, a family engagement coordinator, a counselor, a wellness counselor, the social workers, the family, all in the room at the same time. But it's really important because we're seeing such great growth when we do for the first time for that family. And then we're also only seeing 10% of these families moving on to a higher level of intervention, like a site level, district level attendance intervention meeting. Here's the conferences by site. I'm going to point out a few things. Peninsula runs their own site teams, so the data is not reflecting them accurately here. Same for Bridge. So the data is not reflecting them accurately here. They run their own sort of teams, but the Middle College and the I haven't had a student fall into this category at Middle College. So the other sites that we're talking about, the comprehensive sites, you can see the data. Even the lowest, being Aragon at 10%, is still an amazing improvement for an intervention that's going on. But I want to call out specifically San Mateo High School and the team there and the work they're doing, 26%. You can see the volume is almost 2x any other campus for the students that are chronically absent, and seeing how they're intervening with their SART meetings. And so that's some amazing work. The volume is extremely high for the attendance work that they're doing there, and they're doing it very effectively. Other schools to call out: Mills High School at an extremely high rate of 30%, the best that we have in the district. And then you can see Cappuccino, Hillsdale, and Burlingame all getting acknowledgement for over 25%, 28% improvement for their students when they have those conferences. Okay, attendance summary. We talked about a slight decrease over the entire year from last year. This is a summary slide from School Status. 53% of all students fall into the excellent satisfactory. They say that is extremely high for a district of our size. And then the letter suppression rate, we talked a little bit about. When a school suppresses a letter, like the letters are going out for attendance, oftentimes we suppress them because we know the family situation. Maybe the counselors know the reasoning behind the absences, whether it's mental health related, whether it's health related, and it's well documented. So the schools will suppress so they don't get those letters, because if you get a letter and you've been having conversations about the child going on a 504 plan or something like that, it sort of seems disingenuous to sort of say, oh, I'm also going to send you this letter sort of saying that, we need you in school. And then we talked about the conference rate being amazingly high. Okay, enrollment. So this is just a snapshot of where we're at with our enrollment overall. And we came in pretty well in comparison to our adopted capacity. So we're within, sort of nearly within the 200 student range there. But you can see the adopted capacities that we did back in February. And you can see what the current enrollment, and we say current, it's back to September, but it stays pretty consistent since September. And you can see that on the far right, and you can see the differences. Some schools like San Mateo are up about 50 students, and others are right on the mark, like Mills. And then some are, Cappuccino came in much higher than we've had and that, than we anticipated. That's really great for Cappuccino, not great for our projections. We'll try to do a better job in that regard. We did have 41 families come out to a special, we're enrolling for next year, a special night that we hosted at Parkside with the enrollment team from Student Services, and they did an amazing job getting the families out there. So I think our data is going to be much better and much more reflective of for the future years. Burlingame High School is up about 70, and then Aragon's about 20 over their numbers. And so this shows sort of what we projected for our freshman class. Remember, when we project, it doesn't count that we're going to be moving students. If you remember, 1 out of every 4 students do not go to the school that they are supposed to. They ask for transfers, and we do that really well through the lottery process and the one-to-one process. And so it's going to be reflected more in this data that shows that 75% of our students get the accommodation of the transfer who request it as freshmen. And that's a big number. That's a quarter of all families will move within our students will move within our district. Many families will get the offer of a transfer and rescind or decline. And then we go to the next student on the wait list. And so that will happen again in February. We'll do the lottery for the future year. 75% in comparison. Usually that number's been in the 85 to 90% range for us for who we've accommodated. We tightened our staffing at Aragon High School. Aragon's the most requested school for transfer. And we did have several students still on our wait list for Aragon at the end of as the school year started. Looking ahead, in reflection, 17 years in the district and just, looking at the data we're seeing, I think we're starting to see that social workers are super important to the work that we do. And looking at funding and expansion, there's many opportunities, things like Medi-Cal billing in the future that are going to be a part of how do we sustain social workers going forward. And I think this is going to be a big part of that. Avoiding the reliance on things like TUPE funds for grant funds for some of our biggest, most important interventions, like alternatives to suspension programs, things of that nature that are mostly grant funded. And we've been doing that for years, but it's just sometimes the grants run out. What do you do then? Are you not going to continue with those alternatives? So something to look at. And our social workers are also currently grant funded, except for 2 of them. And then continuing with the school status. So those attendance reports were not created by my office, and they're not managed by my office. They're managed by school status with the data that we provide to them. And they help guide our campuses with some of the technical aspects of it. And that's a big part of the work we do. And then finally, if we're going to address sort of the violence and fighting and things, is really pushing into restorative practices, not just outside the classroom, but inside the classroom. I think we do an amazing job outside the classroom. Our administrators are always looking for ways to restore their community that was harmed by an act by a student. But it's a matter of, if you're going to try to get students to be working better together, it starts with probably in the classroom restorative practices and work that they're doing. And then we just continue with our training that we do with our staff and, especially our administrators. So any questions?
Are there any questions or comments from the board or from the student board reps? I'm going to actually take public comment first. Sorry. Okay. We have one public comment by Ms. Jennifer Blanco. So go ahead.
Don, we have one public comment behind you that's
Yeah,
coming
right
to the
behind
podium. Thanks.
I do have a question. Though. This presentation isn't in the agenda, right? Like it is?
Yes.
Okay, because I saw a different presentation in there.
It's okay.
And it's right. Yeah, it's not. If you can just please, so we can see it later.
It's okay.
Okay, So good evening, everyone. My comments are regarding the presentation that's in the agenda. So thank you so much. My name is Jennifer Blanco. I am a parent. First, let me go back. I'm alumni, and I'm a parent, and I am still a board member for a couple of weeks for the San Bruno Park Elementary School District for 17 years, but involved in my community as a parent advocate for 28. So Dawn, you and I, we have that in common. Congratulations, by the way, on your next journey in serving our students here in Burlingame. So, but I am here tonight as a member of our district's Equity Advisory Committee and as a Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Commissioner. So, let me start with my points. I have a couple points and then some notes. So I will start with saying that more Black and Brown students are suspended now more than before the pandemic. The 50% increase from 273 in 2019 to 419 last year is shameful. My interpretation of the agenda item tonight, I believe, is misleading. The report is not about attendance at all. When you list this topic on your agenda as spotlight on student learning, it's more like student learning loss, because when we're suspending students at the rates that we are, they're not learning, right? Because they're not in class. I believe that the analysis does not critique any of this district's policy or practice. My question to Superintendent Booker and the board is, do you all plan on changing any suspension practices or policies? And why are the policies resulting in less Asian and white suspensions and more suspensions of youth of color? The feeder districts have had major declines in suspensions during this time. No feeder district has increased in their suspension rate. And I do believe that more data and discussions are needed. Have kids been surveyed about being suspended? What percentage of ninth graders are suspended by racial groups? Why are so many of our youth with IEPs suspended?
Ms.
And
Blanco, 30
yes.
seconds.
Okay. And you also did mention, Superintendent Booker, the dashboard came out today. 9.5 of foster youth are suspended, 7.5 students with disabilities, and 9% of long-term English learners, compared to 1.6 white and 9 Asians. And in the recommendation here, on page 8, looking into restorative practices, training for school sites, and bringing on expert consultants will assist in addressing fighting violence, to build a climate and culture of nonviolent ways to address these issues. As a member, if you can give me just one more minute, please.
I can give
One
you
more minute.
about
One more minute is fine. That's all I need. And so in our last meeting, just this past Tuesday, we had probation provides us monthly numbers. We have 30 youth incarcerated currently in our detention center, 29 males, 1 female, 25 are Latinos, 3 are Black and/or African American, 1 Filipino, and 1 Polynesian, which kind of correlates with the suspension rates that are in the district. And also, I just want to make some suggestions. Survey our students on the suspension and expulsions. And since the district is looking into restorative practices training,
I give you a
that
minute.
perhaps,
I give you a minute.
okay, just
Can you-
my suggestion is just to bring that work to the Equity Advisory Committee.
Well,
That's
can
it.
you,
Thank you.
well, bring it with you the next time of our meeting.
Bring
And we
what?
can discuss it, your comments.
Oh,
Because you're
sure.
part of the committee. I mean, that would be helpful for us
Well,
to.
that's why I was
discuss.
asking, that's just bring it up so Dr. Kempke, she leads that. We can have that on our future agenda item.
Okay.
Thank you for the extra.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you. Okay, are there any comments from our student board representatives first?
I agree. I think the idea for a survey based off public comment sounds like a great idea to check in with the wider student body. Additionally, I think it's important to note that some students may have opinions towards whether they can trust school staff with their emotional or personal support. And so I think breaking those barriers might help both in school, both suspensions and chronic absences, to understand that there is someone on their side to work through familial or personal issues.
Thank you. Yeah, and to your point, there was a lot of value to what the public comments were, and thinking about what was being said at the conference that I went to, each data point is a person, is a human, is a student. And yeah, if they're not in class, they're not learning. That's very true. The fact that there's a large number of Latinos, and it looked like, from what I saw in the presentation, that the majority of the suspensions are from the Latino community. It's worrisome. I guess some of the absences, I wanted to ask, have you surveyed why they're absent? Like, what are the reasons why for the different absences and the different tardies? I'll ask that question first. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the most common is there's a wide range of why a student misses school. The goal is for us to drill down into the why and remove those obstacles, whether it's transportation, whether it's housing instability, but most common is mental health. And then in the chronic absenteeism, it's just a matter of taking a day off, like for a vacation, an unexcused absence, to take a 3-day weekend on a 2-day weekend, things of that nature. Those are pretty common in the chronic absenteeism area. But mental health for our more chronic students, mental health is probably number one, which is why we have social workers and teams go knock on doors, meet with families in their living rooms, and talk through the why, and try to work through to find, the services are on the campuses. We can try to serve as much as we can at the home, but those services are very limited and do not get great academic results when we do that. So the focus is getting the students and making incremental changes. So, for example, a student that maybe has missed, let's say, 3 weeks straight of school for mental health reasons, getting into the living room, talking to the family, getting the student to start attending just twice a week, changing their schedule. Maybe it's reducing their schedule from 7 periods down to 4, so it feels like it's something that's doable. Working with the teachers and saying, could we excuse maybe some work, things of that nature, to lessen the burden. A lot of students don't come after long periods of time when students miss and are absent. They don't come because they don't want to be acknowledged as someone who hasn't come to school. They don't want to be publicly, and most teachers, I did this too as a teacher, is you acknowledge how happy you are to see them. You haven't seen them in so long. That's the last thing that most of these students want to hear in public in front of their peers, is that they haven't been seen for so long. And so we work with teachers, our counselors, and then reach out and say, listen, don't acknowledge, don't recognize, just let them come in, let them come in. Those are some of the reasons, the chief reasons that we have, absenteeism.
Okay, thank you. And I guess going back to some of the comment as well, and thinking about how some things, it seems like it hasn't changed that much. If we are not moving the needle, what are we doing as a board that we need to think about the practices that we're advocating for, that we are not advocating for, that we're changing? Why isn't the needle being moved? And so, taking responsibility also on our end, not just staff. What can we do as a board to change some of this? Because and then even in the statistics from 2021 to now, granted, 2021 was coming back from being remote, but the numbers don't seem that different. And so again, like, what can we do? Can we talk about this? Can we agendize having a serious discussion? Because we are failing kids. I mean, that's what it looks like. So those are my comments. Anybody else? Mr. Land.
So, hey, boss, I got a few questions for you. But I do want to say, in talking about the suspensions, I hear what both Trustee Zuniga Likia is saying, and also Trustee Blanco is saying, where we have to move the needle and what can we do. But I also listened to a lot of what you said, and one of the things that I'm noticing in what you're reporting is that personal approach, whether it's conferences or the restorative practices. I even want to I want to acknowledge for your last meeting that you're telling us to worry about funding, Lancy, because these are programs that are proven and need to be expanded or
Yeah.
continued. And if we have, the grants close, we won't be able to continue in the form that we do. And so I'm really going to advocate for what he's trying to say and how can we keep doing that. The one thing I will say is those personal approaches are very important, and I'm glad that we have them in what we're talking about. But one of the things that I noticed is we didn't have this by school. And you mentioned it in your talk. You said it has to do with culture.
Yeah.
It has to do with the school culture sometimes. And I don't want to put any, flashlight too much. I don't want to have the changla where I'm going to throw it at someone, but I am going to say, sorry for those who got that, but I want to be able to say, hey, where's the problem? What's going on? And so if there is a culture problem, and we should also learn from the trends, what schools are reducing it. You did a great job of pointing out the conferences and how it's impacted attendance. But what about the restorative practices? What cultures are doing really well? And can we duplicate or replicate what's happening? And sometimes it is leadership, sometimes it's group leadership, sometimes it's a combination of items. And so we really need to, if we're going to answer what Trustee Zuniga is saying, Andrade Zuniga is saying, we need to look at culture in each of the schools and determine what can be replicated and what could be done differently. Because I do believe we have successes in some of the schools.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know if you want to. I still got more, but if you have any comments or thoughts,
there
on
are.
it,
I mean, some of the school data is in the board memo, but it's not in the. It wasn't one of the slides. I didn't want to call out individual. In summary, the when we had 8 years ago, this data would have reflected drug use as easily the number one suspendable offense.
Yeah.
And you can see that has graduated down to maybe fourth or fifth. And it's because we've built a robust intervention program around substance use or substance use prevention. And so until we actually build something around violent acts and injury and fights, the goal is have something in place before there's actually a fight. Have a calm room. There's information out there. So restorative practices and some approaches will help in this area, but so will extra staffing, extra eyes to sort of see that something might be on, staff. No, that, things could be on the rise. Most of these incidents happen off campus, only steps off campus, but we don't send campus security 2 blocks down the street to supervise a corner because we shouldn't. And so those are some of the things. But if you're going to move the numbers, probably the focus on injury, fight, and acts of violence.
I think you bring up a really good point with the violence and trying to find out, because I agree. I think that is the big hot topic right now. When we're talking about hate, we're talking about violence, we're talking about injuries. Those are the big problems that I'm seeing in the middle school as well as the high school. So what can we do to prevent that? I think you're on the right track. Just to continue, the alternatives to suspension, I totally agreed. It's just alternatives. And that goes back to what you were saying earlier. When we get to attendance, I'm curious because, being from a partner district, how is our dashboard for chronic absenteeism? Are we in the red, the green, the blue? Where are we as a district? I'm curious.
2 years ago, for attendance, we were in differentiated assistance also. But then we graduated out after 2 good years of data. It was actually specific, I think, to our unhoused students and I think our Latinx population. And so their attendance has improved with a lot of the interventions that we're doing. So.
Okay. And just going to the daily attendance, you know, I think you bring up a very strong point, and I just want to reiterate it, where nudging them to the next group and getting them out of one category into another is key. And so, again, complimenting. I love the idea of where the absences are. It's very amazing to me to see that August, September, and October, everybody's doing pretty good. And then we get to November, and then it just kind of peters off to bad. I mean, I wonder societally how we're going to change that, because I bet that's true of every school, you know, in the country. On the next one with equity, an equity view of ethnicity, I'm curious. I know the answer, but we don't have any data on African Americans or Pacific Islanders. I know it's probably because the numbers are so low, but you know, it's like it's still important,
Yeah,
because
so
you know, we have to figure out, are we doing an injustice to students of color?
Yeah.
You know, again, you brought up grant funds, and I totally agree with you. I think for me, the most heartbreaking heartbreaking slide for me, not just about the suspensions, but the one where it talks about chronic versus non-chronic, how much time is lost in learning because the absences, because they're not in instruction.
Yeah.
I think being there, being instruction, having them in the instruction in the school is critical. And it's sad to see that those rates are so dramatic. And so how can we change that? Other than that, thank you very much. I think that was an excellent report. Looking ahead, I do want to make a point though on enrollment. Our actuals are all higher, and we've been talking about a declining enrollment stage, and we are not in a declining enrollment stage based on this. So I'm wondering for budgetary purposes, that I'm looking at Yancy, how we're going to address that, because I have that funny feeling that we are in a different weird kind of position where things are actually increasing instead of decreasing. And so I'm wondering what that's going to look like when we start talking about predictions for staffing. I just put that on the radar. Other than that, thank you very much, Don. I look forward to working with you.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
No, and not to say that, you know, you haven't been working hard on changing some of these things, because there have been some things that are implemented that have changed somewhat, but there's still that, you know, that thing that hangs over us, that there's a group of kids that are not learning. Okay, anybody else? Trustee Chavez.
Thank you, Dawn, for your presentation.
Sure.
And I want to, before I get into my questions, I want to ask you for a favor to keep Mr. Gregland in line over there at the school district.
You know he will after all this.
School district. So thank you for the information. We're really gonna miss you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. To me, one of the most important slides was, and Greg touched upon all this already, so I don't want to reiterate it all. So I already scratched off some things. One of the most important slides to me was an equity view by ethnicity, and just the fact that 34% of Latino students are shown as chronically absent. That's, I don't know what to say, but we obviously need more support in that area. And I want to mention about, you know, you mentioned when we have conferences at the school site level, then attendance is approved, but we have to meet parents where they are. So that might work for some parents, some families, and some students, but that might not work. Well, that won't work for all families and all students. So I feel like we have to meet parents where they are. And you know, I'm very proud of this. My sister, I'm very proud of my sister. She just retired. She's been teaching for over 30 years. She teaches in she taught elementary school in Sacramento, but she would tell me that, and these are elementary school students, so it's not quite the same to equate this to high school, but she would call the parents or go to their house and knock on their door. I'm not saying that our staff should do that, but you mentioned that we have home visits, and you mentioned home visits do not necessarily increase academic performance. But I think that mental health is just as important, or even if not more so important. So even though home visits don't increase, or maybe we don't have enough data to back that up, home visits, you mentioned home visits do not necessarily increase academic performance, but I'm not sure if we have enough staff to keep up the pace and visit all the home
I
sites.
think my point was that they're
Yeah.
not bringing the academic, they're not home instructors. So when they meet,
Right.
they're they're really just addressing the mental health concern. They're not bringing, they're
Right.
not a teacher bringing books and
I see what you're saying,
academic
assignments and
yeah,
to help,
assignments,
right,
things of
like
that
to,
nature.
right. No, I get what you're saying.
I think,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to intervene.
Sure.
I want to just say, the home visits do
Yeah.
have a positive impact.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he was just trying to separate the academic component to it, because I think you're right. You meet them where they are. And
Yes.
I just need to advocate for
Yeah.
what I know, because he talks to me about it. I
Yeah.
mean, at the middle school level, it's like they do the home visits and that makes an impact sometimes.
Yeah,
It really
no,
has
I'm
a-
saying how I think the home visits impact the mental health support for the family and for the student. So I'm wondering if we have enough staff that can even help move this needle more for all of our families. But when I look at this slide about 34% Latino students are shown as chronically absent, I know we send out letters, but going the extra mile just to
Yeah.
meet the families.
Again, with the first letter,
Mhm.
you see 80%
Yeah.
improve and don't get
Okay,
a second
okay.
letter. So then you're talking about that 20%. And so that 20% actually end up with conferences and end
Yeah,
up in,
yeah.
and those conferences don't always happen in the middle of the school day. They do happen at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock at night.
Yeah,
Times.
okay.
Sometimes those meetings happen actually in this room at Parent Connect
Okay.
meetings. And so in the evenings with our social workers. So I just want to make sure that, we try to be as flexible as possible,
Yeah.
but we also try to build a system. And so having 5 adults come to a 5 o'clock meeting, we could not replicate that within, for contractual reasons. right?
Sure. Well, no, I mean, that's true. But I did want to say that, I know that all of our educators, their goal is to support each and every student, and absolutely that's your goal as well. It's clearly, it's evident. I was just wondering, what the next step is. What else can we do to meet the family, to meet the students' needs by having that personal connection with the family, with the student? Yeah. And if we had enough, if you need more staff support, just like Trustee Lance said, if we're increasing enrollment but at the same time, we also want to increase attendance. So we'll have to look at the budget and ask Yancy more questions about dedicating more.
My
staff.
recommendations are on the last slide. So.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And wonderful presentation. Thank you so much, Dawn.
Trustee Griffin, sorry, you had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, no, thank you. First, Don, I want to thank you for your attention to detail and dedication. And I really appreciate it. I think I remember you 17 years ago on the San Miguel campus. So I really
Yeah,
enjoyed.
you toured with Stan Pitts, I think.
Yeah, no, I did.
And I met you. I remember for the first time.
Yeah, Stan was my liaison to the campus. So
He was mine too.
I do have some serious questions and comments, and the presentation was really a good one that we have not seen before. And one of the issues, and there's so many here, and we've kind of really had a lot to say on this. We only see a lot of these kinds of reports once a year, and then we go away, and then people go and do their work. Now we've got, we're going to have a different leader, a different, maybe potentially direction. And I was thinking about, while the board saying, oh, we ought to do this, we ought to focus on it. I was thinking about our goals and where is this on our goals, somebody? And that's a rhetorical question. So you don't have to answer that question in terms of how we prioritize. I agree. It is a serious goal. It's a serious concern. It used to be a deal, and there was disproportionality, and we had a disproportionality of African Americans and students of color that were classified as special ed, which also tied in, believe it or not, to discipline. And that was when tons of students got thrown out of class for defiance and disruption. And that's one of the things that has improved the statistics, because that was an artificial kind of go to jail card. Everybody used it and unfairly. So, but that's not, that's kind of then. I hope that we can come up with once again, when we come across something insightful like this, we come up with a way that we don't wait till next year to hear. And this is kind of addressed to the superintendent, that we don't wait till next year to hear how we did in the last 12 months and what, and figure out what's going on. So maybe as you construct or maybe as you have the cabinet construct weeklies, we can have stuff on this that responds to the report, responds to areas of concern, gets us some statistics, and will give us sort of an opportunity to stay close to the situation. On the violence, I got a question on, we're talking about violence, and I had a question that seemed like restorative justice, was the thing of the future somewhere in the during COVID, and I can't remember, because COVID became a cloud, that, we were talking about the hope that restorative justice would bring to our campuses and bring to the students. But it sounds like it really, like so many things in our society, it really hasn't been leveraged and used to its full extent. I mean,
Right. It's been in this district we've been training administrators, counselors, and wellness staff in this district for 12 years on restorative practices. And I mean, alternatives to suspension is a form of restorative practices. I mean, when you're going to try to repair the harm that was done by an act of an individual, right? So it's been around. We've trained. I think if you're going to change the culture where a student's not going to think that the one way to settle an issue is to fight someone, that means that you have to change the culture across the entire campus, not just in the assistant principal's office. I think that's sort of what my point is like it has to be in the hallways, it has to be in the classrooms, it has to be on the football field, it has to be everywhere. That if it's just happening in the assistant principal's office between two students who have had conflict, that's not enough. I mean, that will change your suspension rates, but it's not going to change your outcomes of the climate and culture of the campus.
I agree. Now, the thing that we had been talking about, and we haven't used the word gang in so long. The gangs are still out there. I'm curious as to how much of this violence has some gang relations or gang ties.
You asked. I mean, we could pull the data, but most of these incidents of fights are Latinx students on Latinx students. And so that will inflate your numbers when that happens. And I could ask my, Valerie Bizu and others to sort of pull that data. It's readily available. And you could see that it usually is, two students from a similar, cultural background for the most part. And I didn't want to call it out in the report, but you asked the question, when you have a gang incident, it's usually similar culturally. So,
I mean, it seemed like we used to work with, the police would kind of have their gang task force and they would be involved to some degree. And I don't know if they still are, if it's a budgetary issue or they need to stay out of our business or what.
No, we still work very closely.
Very closely. I get phone calls all weekend about incidents that are going on in our community from our SROs, our YSOs, our Sergeant Unga. I mean, they are on top of it. There's still a county gang task force. Most of our municipalities are part of that team. And you do see it. It's just not as much in the news. It is still an issue. I mean, you have seen some of those incidents come before you in expulsion proceedings over the last 12 months with me.
That was good news on the fewer lost days, and I think that there's a lot of good stuff in here, and I don't want the positive trends to get lost because we're only focusing on, for the most part, stuff that needs attention or needs improvement. the other thing, and I think future reports, and you won't be making them, but certainly, I hope that we'll be able to incorporate county data and state data that really gives us some benchmarks for like we understand some of the attributes and of the of our other districts, like say for sure in the county. And it'd be interesting to be able to compare demographics and incidents and some of that data just to give us a feel for where some commonality is and maybe work together on some of those issues.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of improvements that we've seen over the years about reducing suspension rates in certain areas is really some of the work that in this presentation, some of the comments that have been made I won't call them out, but previous trustees and yourself said it'd be great if there was a menu for every suspension, that there's something that you could respond to so the kid doesn't get suspended. We're trying to do that. I think what I'm saying is we haven't made that many inroads though with the acts of violence. And so that's sort of maybe that next iteration. And we try to find something there because that's going to move the needle the most.
Right.
My final comment, I had some notes up here. Which I don't want to beat the point. Taking the long road and the picture, there have been improvements in the way we view discipline issues, the way we view punishment related to those. And the suspension statistics were off the chart before. And I mean, where the trustees were involved, and every time we turned around, we were having meetings, and I think we were going more to the letter of the law in terms of, somebody got somebody on the ed code, and we got a second finding, and we didn't try to, I don't know that we tried our best to save that student from going down that path or making that student stay on that path. I think now we're trying to keep the students involved. We're trying to keep, involve the families. We are trying to, different things to, looking at the attendance and looking at stuff. So, I mean, we're certainly not doing the same old thing. It's a difficult problem. So it's like so many things that we struggle with in education. It's a tough one. So thank you for that report.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, no, that's great, Trustee Griffin. That's what I mean. Like, as I'm glad you asked for, different information, and I would also like to see what other districts have been doing, and in comparison, like ones that really reflect how we are here. That would be really interesting. Trustee Jacobson, go ahead. You had a comment. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. I don't know what number slide it is, but where you're talking about conference effectiveness by school. And you said that Bridge and Peninsula have a different system, so there's no data for that. What are they not having conferences, or what's the difference there?
Yeah, so I mean, this slide just reflects the data going in. So it means that someone has to actually put the data in that reflects that conference. This is a conferencing. So Dr. Showman, Dr. Campana, they run their own conferences. They're just not tabulating in this data and following exactly. Their students still get letters, things of that nature. But the conference setting practice is probably living in Aries, but it's not living here. And it's probably an area that we could start getting that data so you could show. It's only because the social workers who are actually helping to precipitate are work at only the six comprehensive high schools. The 3 social workers work at the 6 comprehensive. So that's why this data is sort of shown here in this way.
So the conferences are happening at those
They are. They
schools?
have attendance meetings. Yeah, they have attendance
Okay.
meetings. It's just not being
Understood.
tabulated in this dashboard that helps to manage. And it can be an area that we sort of emphasize for them going forward, but they do have meetings about student attendance and things of that nature.
Okay, yeah, it would be nice to have that captured.
Okay.
Thanks. And then the other question I had is about, so when it comes to fights and violence and gangs that we've been talking about, and you said that this is a shift in the last 8 years, like it used to be more drug related, now it's more fight related, or
Well, maybe I should clarify. This
Okay.
number has been persistent.
it's been persistent. Okay.
It's just, if you're talking about 1,000 students being suspended 10 years ago for defiance, it's going to lower this percentage of fights considerably, right? And so if 10 years ago, fights was not a large piece of the pie because defiance and drug use were. And so when you eliminate all those, it makes the fights were happening. They were quite
Okay.
disruptive 10 years ago, very
Okay.
much as disruptive they are today, as always. I think what the point is that we've eliminated K violations. We've eliminated substance from being the predominant substance use and possession to be a predominant issue on a school campus. But with we're left with the fights and things of that nature as now the largest piece of the pie. But the incident numbers have been pretty persistent, number wise. If you talk about the end.
Okay, that makes sense. I was curious if phone use had anything to do with it, and if, I don't know, phones being used during campus hours to plan or,
Okay,
interact.
not to throw any school under the bus
Yeah,
about phone use, but
yeah.
the number one suspended school is San Mateo High School with Yonkers. So,
Okay,
so I don't know if phone use can have a correlation.
that was my question. I
Yeah.
just wondered if there was any relationship or not.
Yeah.
And if when we're considering our phone policy, if that would be a consideration or not. That was what I was getting at.
It's worth looking into though.
Okay,
Okay.
that's it. Thanks.
Are there any other questions or comments?
I just wanted to thank Dawn for answering all of our questions.
Ditto.
and-
Sure.
Yeah. and
Thanks,
the
Don.
presentation.
Great
Thank
last
you.
presentation.
Thank you.
And thanks for highlighting all the positives as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's great.
Thank you, Dawn. Okay, we will go on to construction. Mr. Hawkins.
All right, thank you. Please bear with me. I'm getting over a little bit of a cold, so if I jump and grab a little bit of water, you'll know why. All right. Well, I'm so excited tonight to bring forth location options for the Bridge Academy. The Bridge Academy started a little over 7 years ago as part of Peninsula High School. In July, the Bridge Academy officially became the district's 10th school with CDE's approval earlier in the year. And since its inception, Bridge has shared its campus and its space with the adult school. The board has directed staff to find a long-term home and space for the Bridge Academy that meets its needs and shows to the students, staff, and the community the importance of this school. Earlier this year, staff engaged with QKA, one of the board-approved architects, to support the review of needs and location options for Bridge Academy. Tonight, we'll go over the Bridge Academy program needs, the location considerations that we went through when reviewing each of the options. We'll go over the location options that we considered in this process. We'll highlight our recommended options, and then we'll go over key milestones and next steps if the board gives us direction. As part of our work with QKA and Dr. Showman, that we determined the space needs for the Bridge Academy. Just a few of those noted are 6 regular classrooms, 2 specialty classroom space that are a little bit larger, including science with lecture and lab space, and art with the additional needs of an art space. Also, the need for a multi-purpose room and space for the campus to come together, an administrative space, access to athletic space, a wellness space, as well as the other logistical space of running a school of that size. In determining what locations made the most sense, we looked at several factors, including, and I'll highlight the first one, being the proximity to where the student population lives. We also looked, obviously, at several factors, but some key ones were that it was on district-owned property, which is important because we can control what we do on those properties, and we don't have to spend the time, the several years, as this board knows, to acquire property and what that takes. The disruption to existing programs, the lack of reliance on other public or private partners. This really focusing on other approvals that would be needed likely by other public agencies. We considered stakeholder input and of course costs. And there's several other considerations that we looked at. When we look at that key consideration where the student population lives, we needed to know where they lived. So with help of the Student Services Department, thanks, Don, as well as the IT department, we were able to map out over the last few years where the students that attended the Bridge Academy lived. And while there were Bridge Academy students who lived throughout the district, there is a focus in and around the areas close to San Mateo High School, as you can see with the group of dots in the middle area, primarily west of the 101, but also a little bit east of the 101 there. We formally looked at 8 options, and then we will show the board 7 of those options tonight. The one that we won't show you is the Hinckley Road option. That would be the property adjacent to Peninsula High School. As the district right now does not have control of that property, we didn't think it was appropriate to bring that. But as we move forward, if the board doesn't like the recommended option, we could come back and look at that as an option. The first 3 options that we considered and evaluated out as inferior option were due to the benefits of these 3 options not outweighing the distance that they were from the population that this school would serve. That includes the Cappuccino option. So just to put you out where you are, this is in the Boneyard, the Maintenance and Operations Boneyard above Cappuccino's football field. This is Hillsdale High School on the secondary baseball field on 31st Avenue, right next to the Performing Arts Center and gym, as well as the Mills High School secondary baseball field that was replaced recently by the Fields project that was put in here. All 3 of these options were viable in terms of they would fit the program and they could do that. But their benefits, in our opinion, and when looking at the considerations, did not outweigh the distance from where the students lived. All right, the next 3 options we've determined as viable, but for various reasons are not staff's recommended, but they are all 3 viable options. The remaining four that we will talk about tonight are all on what I call the greater San Mateo Educational Center. That's San Mateo High School, the district office, the adult school, Bridge Academy, transportation. So just to kind of put out where we are, on the bottom of the screen is Poplar. On the right of the screen is Humboldt. And so the existing buildings on the left and the bottom are the modular buildings of the adult school. And on the right is the transportation, we call it the transportation barn. And so this option basically has the Bridge Academy where it currently is. The positives, obviously, are that it is in the location where our Bridge Academy students primarily live. It does fit on that, along with some additional parking. But some of the negatives are the Bridge Academy and the adult school would have to continue sharing a campus. And that has had, some complications over the last several years. Also, interim housing would be needed for this. And so the district would need to find a space for the Bridge Academy for the likely 1.5 to 2 years that the Bridge Academy would be under construction. That would be costing us money. That wouldn't really be giving us any long-term benefit, as well as it would be an interruption to another program and would have logistical concerns. The next two items, just to kind of put you where we are, the bottom left corner is the new gym building at San Mateo High School, the auxiliary gym. And then the new tennis courts are on the bottom to the right, and to the right is Humboldt. So these are two options that use the same basic space, is by redesigning the softball and the baseball fields. You can use some inefficient space. There's kind of some rolling hills out there, and you can create enough space to put the Bridge Academy based on the needs that were identified. So the positives, again, its proximity to.
I'm sorry, can you orient it? I'm
Yeah.
just really trying to get a sense of this.
Yeah.
So the two-story building you're actually putting towards the
Apartment buildings.
building.
Correct.
Okay, so that's what that is.
And then basically that parking lot is at home plate of the San Mateo High School baseball field.
Got it. Okay. That helps. Thank you.
Yeah. So the positive of that is the proximity. You also you have space between the Bridge Academy and San Mateo High School and the adult school. The big negative is that we likely would need an ingress permit from the city of San Mateo. That would mean they would control the timing and potentially some of the budget of this process when determining the cost of that ingress permit. The other negatives involve the investment in the cost of the new baseball fields and softball fields. That's likely $15+ million in addition to the cost of the Bridge Academy new construction. The other item about this is, in order to fit the entire Bridge Academy, the baseball fields and the softball fields would be a little bit undersized. The baseball field more than a softball field. Baseball field traditionally down the lines are 325 feet. On these, that's 290 feet, so a little over 10% smaller. And then the softball field, usually down the lines, is about 200 feet. You're looking at about 190, so about a 5% decrease. You can make changes to it to make it play a little bit larger, but it definitely would be a smaller field than normal. Yes. Hold on one second. One of the other potential problems of this is you're putting a school right up against an apartment building and neighbors. And so there definitely could be some concerns for the neighbors around noise or traffic, or those kind of those kind of things. This option is another take on the same. So we're talking about the same space. The baseball field stays where it is, just flips orientation, going just switching orientation there. And the softball field moves up closer to the apartments, the Woodlake. And it puts the new potential Bridge Academy adjacent to the new gym, auxiliary gym at San Mateo High School. So it has the same positives and negatives as the other ones, with the exception of the school is not that close to the neighbors. So you have some of the less issues there. One big improvement on this one, though, is no ingress permit would be required from the city of San Mateo, and therefore we would control the construction of this project. But also, one of the negatives is, this would now be surrounded by the San Mateo High School athletic fields. And as I would likely call, it would be a donut hole in terms of completely being surrounded by the high school and having the impacts of folks moving back and forth between them during the day and after school. Lastly, this is staff's recommended location. This is also on the San Mateo High School adult school campus. To orient you, the bottom is Poplar Avenue. And you have, at the very right, you have the transportation barn. At the bottom, you have the modulars for the adult school. And then kind of in the middle above where the new projected building is, that square, is the Smart Center. So the new recommended location would be in the parking lot that is directly off of Poplar. Any other, do people know where that is? Or do I need to give any more?
So
What?
you just take out the parking lot is what you're saying.
You would relocate the parking lot. So, so the school would be where
And
the
it's right
parking.
next to the school because the school buildings are right there.
Yeah, it would be between the adult school and the biotech space
Right.
for the San Mateo. Yeah, it would have its own space. It would have a natural own space delineated on just two sides, but it would have street frontage on Poplar. It would have its own entrance. It would include improvements to the adult school. And so that would, as you can note, the plaza in front, the crosswalk that links the Smart Center to the adult school. If you've been over there, it's always a little bit, the Smart Center and the rest of the adult school don't necessarily have a natural transition. With the delineation, that would be included. And then the parking would be relocated from the parking lot where it is, and it would be relocated up to where the portable classrooms are, but more into the grass space that's there, or most of the year the dead grass that's over there. It keeps the garden, which was a really important item for our adult school when they were looking at there. And it allows the adult school to keep flexibility in terms of future capital needs. So in the next 10 to 20 years, as likely the adult school will need to address the modular classrooms that were there, either to modernize them or to replace them. It would give a really easy space to redesign and potentially update and do that. Go ahead.
One of the things that I appreciate about this plan, and you may have already mentioned this, but we won't have to waste money on interim housing. And that's a considerable amount of money. Bridge Academy can stay where it is while construction's being completed. We talk about interim housing as two words. interim housing, and yet the reality of finding interim housing, transporting students, setting up the infrastructure, this could easily be $1 million+ by the time the project's over. And those are dollars we can, I think, better spend on this facility. Mr. Hawkins also mentioned the hardscaping in and around the proposed bridge facility, but also I would say to help beautify that whole area with adult education. If you look at the two-story building, the proposed two-story building for Bridge Academy, I would also recommend that it's built in the same architectural style as San Mateo High School, so that from Poplar, it looks like one continuous campus. And I appreciate what Mr. Hawkins said about future-proofing adult ed in their facility square. If you look at their modulars and those 70 new parking spaces in the existing garden, who knows what adult ed might want to look like 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now. They may want to do something different with that space. If we go back a few slides, you don't need to, but if we go back a few slides and look at the idea of Bridge Academy being placed in that same area, adult education no longer has any flexibility to really redevelop its space. So I do want to mention that we have met with not only Dr. Schoeman, who's here this evening, she has shared this with her staff. I've met with adult ed leadership and also their union representatives, and they are all highly in favor of this recommended plan. And I think, as the board knows, over the last several board meetings, we've had several people come and talk about their concerns. And so to hear that they're all on recommendation is really heartening. Thanks.
No, thank you so much for that context. Just to add, to finalize on this one, so the considerations, the positive considerations, the proximity to students, obviously, all the options at the end, did have that proximity. It maximizes the Bridge Academy and adult school learning spaces and clearly delineates both campuses so that they have really their own space, which I think is really important to both programs. It has the least overall impact to surrounding programs. You're not moving that many stuff around. At the end of the day, moving parking is the easiest thing to move around as you move forward. It's the most cost effective of all of the plans. As we look, we noted some of the other ones. There is one, we look at all the positives and all the negatives. We would have to relocate some of that solar over to the new parking spaces, but that likely would be less than literally the cost of the interim housing. And so we also could probably do some upgrades in terms of maintenance on that and hopefully get a few more years out of that solar as well as we move that over. Go ahead. Yeah.
I just had a quick question. What is that thing where it says crosswalk link and it looks like a line with lines going through it?
Yeah.
Yeah, what is that?
So the Smart Center, which is the box right there,
Mhm.
in the remainder of the adult school campus, have never had really a nexus, kind of a flow throughout that. You either go to the Smart Center, or you go over to, the main modular campus over there. It hasn't kind of had a flow together. And so part of this, to both create that flow as well as to create delineation between the bridge and the adult school, staff would recommend that we do some hardscape work, that we potentially look at that plaza in front, which is, you could look at it as that smaller box plaza or larger box above. Thank you. We've got some unused space up here that we could look to make some improvements to the adult school as part of this process. But basically,
That's
having
what I
the smart center is where the administrative space is. It's where folks register for classes, other things. A lot of times they may go there. They may do testing. Our adult school reps tonight, we're talking about some of the testing that gets done in the Smart Center. But there's not necessarily a flow between the Smart Center and the rest of the adult school campus.
But I think specifically what she's asking is that area that you're pointing out, that's existing parking right now.
And so that won't change?
Well, it
Or-
could. I mean, these are all very drafted, early draft depictions.
understand.
What
Yeah.
we are recommending, what we are very much recommending is that this whole area, that we actually look at this whole area as potential upgrades for hardscape parking. What do we do with the basketball courts? How do we make the flow of traffic better? How do we set Bridge up for its needs? How do we delineate? So this is very rough,
Okay.
very, very rough. This does not depict the kinds of hardscaping options that real schematic designs would do. But there's a lot of possibility there.
Yeah.
I think when that, Randall, I think that's a Superintendent Booker, sorry. These all, when we worked with QKA, the main focus on this was number one, the space needed. Number two, could the space needed fit into the locations that we identified?
Right.
That was the major idea here. If the board gives us direction and approves us to move forward, and I'll get to that in the next steps, we'll go over, the different level as we'll actually get into a schematic design presentation right next, which would have a lot of the information.
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure I understood what this picture was,
No.
what these parts were. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. So the next step's key milestone. So where we are, we're at the far left. We're at tonight. Potentially the board giving direction on a preferred option. If we get direction from the board, then we would look to come back potentially in December to have the board formally approve the project and the location of the project. We would also at that point ask the board for permission to go out for an RFP for an architect. We would then hire an architect. That architect would then meet with all the stakeholders. Those would include the Bridge Academy, administration and staff. Those would include the adult school, as well as San Mateo High School, in order to get everybody's feedback, build back a much more in-depth design to bring back to the board, in a schematic design to the board. Then the project would go to DSA. And we would, after DSA approval, we would go through contractor selection process.
Can you pause just
yeah.
for a second and explain what DSA is?
Sorry, thank you. DSA is the Division of State Architect. That's who approves our architecturals. We don't go to the city. We don't go to the county. As a political subdivision of the state, we're required to go to the Division of State Architect for approval for all of our major projects. And then if all goes well, we would start construction, complete the project, and then most importantly, our students and educators would move in.
So I want
process.
to just interject here on the timeline, and I appreciate the fact there's no dates on here, which is important. So tonight is a little bit of just a preliminary, give you as a board, give the community a sense of what we've looked at, what we're recommending. I'm assuming that the board would want to talk about it, think about it, and even come back at our board meeting in December, where that's when they would give us direction on the preferred option. And I'm pushing this timeline out a bit because I want to get us in and through the sale of Crestmore so that we have those dollars aligned to us before we go and start hiring architects, schematic design, all of those kinds of things. So I don't want the board to feel any kind of pressure this evening. This is a preliminary review with the board. Give the board an opportunity to ask questions, give us an opportunity to research answers for you if you need them, and then come back in December. At the December board meeting, what I would hope for is some kind of direction from the board so that we can start thinking about a timeline, lining up when could we have a schematic design for you, all of those kinds of things. That takes time. It takes time to work with an architect. I'll take direction tonight if you'd like, but we built it into the timeline to give you time to think about it.
Trustee Land.
So thank you. I guess I'm a little upset about how this presentation went, and I'll tell you why. It feels like this is only one option. You gave us a whole bunch of options, and all I see is one option that we really can consider. And while that might be good, and I heard all the wonderful things about the last one, I just didn't feel like I have any other choice. And unfortunately, as a board member, I don't like that. I think it's unfortunate because I think we should be given options. I know that one of them is not viable at this point, and I understand why, and I won't go into it, but maybe we need to wait for that to see where that unfolds. But I guess for me, when we look at these things, we really should find a few alternatives that we can actually choose from. What I'm hearing here tonight is there's really only one choice, and I'm not sure if I'm going to buy into that. So, but I hear what you're saying. I hear that we've communicated with all the partners and everything, but I really wonder if we really haven't explored everything we really could. And that I got to get over that. So I'm wondering what everybody else is thinking.
Can I respond real quick? I'm gonna push back because it's getting to this point of consensus with both parties that will be affected by it, I think is pretty important. Second, I do feel like I have a choice to, on what I think is the best thing for this project, but I'm not the one using it. So I just want to also listen to the folks that are the ones that are going to be impacted. And if this is what they've found to be the best solution for what they have, then we need to listen to that. Also,
I haven't heard that though, just so you know.
well, in some of in one of the slides, especially in thinking about where the students live, I mean, that's extremely important because then we have to think about transportation.
Oh, I don't
So-
disagree with that. But again, are we looking at all our viable options? That's what I'm going to say. That's what I'm saying.
I think we did.
Really? Okay.
I think, I mean, out of all of the options that we were given, that we were shown, they all weighed out what would have been the most important pieces that the folks impacted would have been talking about. So that's where it's almost easy to say.
Yeah, if you're not given a choice, it's easy to choose. You're just given one choice. That's
maybe
it.
we should have folks that are impacted come and talk to us and give us
I would
the
agree with
reasons
that.
why.
I
Okay.
think that would be a good idea.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. No, I appreciate both of your viewpoints and your questions and your comments. This is definitely not a quiet group, right? We usually speak our mind, usually.
Never.
Never. So what I do appreciate about this is that we have been receiving information in the superintendent's weekly updates. And so we know that there were other options other than what's on the presentation. And then those were deemed to be less viable because it's not land that we own. So we'd have to spend additional monies. So I do know that other options were looked at and they were kind of vetted out internally. But I do agree with Trustee Andrade Zuniga that where the students live is important. So the slide that shows where the current students live, I guess it's the current students of the current year, not the past few years, right? So it just helps me to see that if most of the students are in San Mateo, I mean, I live in San Bruno. I like San Bruno, but you don't want to put a location in San Bruno when most of our students for our bridge school live in San Mateo. We want to have the location that's the most convenient for the students and the families. But I also want to mention that I think that Greg, I think that they've mentioned that they also met with the leadership team and also Dr. Showman. So if Showman likes either of these examples, then I think that speaks volumes. And I do agree with the last three choices: San Mateo High Humboldt, San Mateo High softball field, San Mateo High Poplar. So I think you did a great job, Mr. Hawkins, of showing the positives and the negatives. But I do appreciate your comments as well. But I think what's important is where do the students live? and the staff and the leadership team. What options would work best for Dr. Showman? What does does the staff really think that this is the best option? If it is, then I would want to support staff in that way.
Well, Dr. Showman's here.
Yes.
Would you mind giving some of your opinions and of how it would impact your students? Because you see them every day.
Knowing that when we came to ask to become a school, our idea was to be a community school. We believe that it is very important for our school to be located where our students live, because the vast majority of our kids get to school by walking or by, bus. None of them are getting dropped off. Very few drive. So being close or staying like either on the adult school campus or close to it is our preference. We like the recommendation because we think, one, it's located exactly where our students live. Two, we've been waiting a long time for this. And it also seems to maybe have the shortest timeline in terms of what can be built and done. And our students, our students heard about this at their student equity thing. And today was like, we're going to have a school next year. I'm like, no, no. Maybe when you can come back and work here. But we had a student showcase earlier tonight. And so this kid's like, you look tired. You got to go home. I'm like, I'm going to go to the board meeting. And we started talking about why and the facilities. And it's like, this started in one room and the whole conversation. And he's like, oh, so when I come back, I'll be like, oh, where's Miss Showman? Oh, she's in her office because she has an office. He's like, Miss Lily, you'll have your own office. And we'll have this. And we'll have this. And so we are really happy with this recommendation. It's hard to find. I live in San Mateo too. I know it's hard. If you think I haven't been driving around for 6 and 7 years looking for a spot for our school, and I know that Superintendent Booker and Cabinet and Yancey have done the same. So for us and for our staff, we are really happy with the recommended option.
Well, that changes my mind.
Yes.
I'm glad I mentioned it.
Sorry, Trustee Griffin's been sitting there with his hand for a while. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You're on mute.
You're on mute. We can't hear you.
Sorry. One thing, and I wish that I was there with Trustee Land so I could be kidding and jabbing and shooting rubber bands at him or something. I think the 2 points that are really important are, student access, where the students live, and, getting stakeholder views, because that's one of the criticisms when boards go off frequently and make these decisions. They make them in a vacuum and don't solicit what the stakeholders think. And I think we've tried to do that. And quite frankly, and I don't know, you remember maybe 2 or 3 meetings ago, I said, well, I went out to Bridge and I walked and, and the conditions are really crowded. There's 3, 4, or 5 activities in one little tiny room. And Dr. Showman showed me around. And then that was also the day that I think the superintendent and I were standing out there. And I had kind of looked and considered, and first I was like, oh man, not another thing at San Mateo. I'm like, okay, I considered from a practicality standpoint, it probably, and Greg, this isn't a 100% sealed deal, but I think it's being presented as the preferable or most practical deal. And certainly we can shut it down, but we've got to kind of use our logic, use our thinking caps, our logic, our governance. If we got our little governance cap about how to make wise decisions, to look at it. The other concerns I had was the architecture, and when I was standing out there, and the superintendent, he's showing me these other alternatives. And I'm like, man, we're turning the baseball field around. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. None of this other stuff, at least on the San Mateo campus, made any sense. And every time we were doing something that went either close to Woodlake, it presented serious challenges. or anytime we were going to start exiting on Humboldt, that presented serious challenges because of the housing being adjacent to where we might end up putting these structures in these putting a structure in a parking lot. I mean, we probably all need to ponder this, certainly as the superintendent said, but it kind of, this wasn't on the table when I walked the campus, and I wasn't happy with the other alternatives. Now, one thing I do have that I want to add on this one, I like, okay, we're future proofing this thing because, needs change over time, and we're building a building that's going to be around for quite a while. The traffic flow, I am really, the traffic flow at San Mateo is not very good. And I'm hoping, and I want to see what this will look like, because anybody, and I think I was out there with Dr. Showman, she's talking about people, if to the extent they can hop over those speed bumps, having to dash through traffic or almost getting hit by traffic. And I've never been around San Mateo when school got out. I never wanted to be around there, and we know how terrible it is. But I think we need to address the traffic flow and mitigate that as part of this whole deal. And the other thing, and I cost. Do we have any idea of what the ballpark within, I don't know,
5 million?
Yeah, what are we generally talking about here? So we can start wrapping our minds around what the cost might be.
So the cost is not insignificant on these projects. We're probably talking in the neighborhood of 18,000 square feet. So you're looking at least $15 million plus on this project, probably more.
Does that
But,
include the adult school stuff?
So I want to be clear, Trustee Griffin. I can't give you any good information until we have a schematic design.
I
Really,
understand,
in there.
Yancey, but I know you guys have square footage and you had general formulas that'll get you within 5 million or 10
Sure.
million or something. I
This
just
project
want to
will at
know.
least be $15 to $20 million. And then depending on what is needed, as you noted, for traffic flow or for changes or,
Hardscape.
for, different things like that. Yeah, hardscape, those could increase those costs. But yeah, we're still looking at $1,000+ a square foot in terms of construction costs. So depending on where the final square footage ends, and then all of those additional things. But yeah, we're looking at least $15 to $20 million on this project.
Let me take the students real quick because I know it's getting late and they might have to leave. Student board reps, do you all have any comments about this project? Any
Not at the
perspective?
moment, other than I also agree with the final location probably being the best. Mentioning the one con that was listed on the slide that the solar panels would need to be relocated, I think was somewhat insignificant considering all the other locations required softball fields to be moved and such. So I think we can all understand that whatever is currently on the land that we would use is already being in use. So there shouldn't be too much worry about that.
Great. I'm gonna try to see people that haven't spoken yet. Sorry.
The other-
So I'll do, huh?
Did the other student board rep want to say something?
Yeah. Oh,
Oh,
sorry. Did you
sorry.
want to say something too? Sorry.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to thank your input and for being here tonight to like say something for the Bridge Academy, because that really helped us understand like why you like the final option really was the best in this scenario. So I would like to thank you for that.
Okay. I'll do Trustee Jacobson and then Trustee Land again. I'm sorry. Did you want to say something too? Trustee Chavez? No. Okay. Great. Go ahead.
Okay, I just want to double check that, is this the best, like, is this considering forecasting for the future in case bridge program? Is there room for flexibility? I'm just thinking about Peninsula High School and how we now have to get more land. So because it now needs more space that we didn't plan for adequately. Are you taking that into consideration?
Yeah, when we looked at the size of the program, we looked at it as it increasing in size. The classrooms, a space for 8 classrooms for is probably more than is definitely more than what they need right now. I'm sure any good administrator would use additional space, but in terms of when we look at it from an architectural and a building standpoint, that would be larger than it would be. We still have flexibility, but I do want to just to, honestly answer your question. We do have limited space in terms of, so
Right.
if it tripled in size, would we have to potentially look for another option? I don't know. Well, sorry, I do know. We would have to look at other options. Sorry, tripled from the increased size that we were looking at, already doubling plus in terms of the number of students that are in that program. But with the spatial needs that were determined by the program and by our architects, and the available options, yeah, that is the best space that we have. There is potentially, obviously, room around, but we'd have to again go through this process and potentially find
Sure,
additional space.
Sure. I just mean in the, yeah, I mean, to Trustee Griffin's point, the cost is not insignificant. So we want to get the most bang for our buck. And then just to respond to Trustee Land, I totally hear what you're saying. And you don't want to feel like you've been boxed in to a certain option here. I do think that I personally feel, because you asked, I want to know how you guys feel. I personally feel that due diligence has been done in terms of what the options are, in terms of the different properties that we have to consider, and especially in relation to the proximity to where the students live. And this is a community that I think newcomers who will be coming will also be drawn to this neighborhood. So I think it's the right option. I think it ticks the boxes, and I'm actually happy that the decision is made easy for us, and that there's consensus among the stakeholders. Yeah.
Okay, Trustee Land.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. Because you outlined what my concerns were. I didn't want to feel boxed in. But again, taking that to the side, because I think that's more of a board thing. I think if you would have just presented this and said, hey, we looked at this, this is the best one, I would have been okay. I get it. I just don't feel like I had a lot of options here. But in looking at this, I mean, then take all that aside, looking at this, I love that there's more plaza space. There's outdoors, it looks, when you see green, I think, oh, that's good landscaping. That's greenery. That's something. I also like the fact that you're going to kind of replicate it with what San Mateo's traditional school looks like. I think all of these are great ideas. And I think ultimately I can wrap my head around it and say, yeah, based on what the students need, the neighborhood, what the administration, Dr. Soman's saying, these are all really great ideas. So I don't want to disregard the work that's gone into this because it looks really good. I just feel from a political standpoint, when we're looking at stuff, if you're going to give me options so that I can say this or this. But what I'm seeing is a really good choice. I'm just going down the road of what Jennifer said, or Trustee Jacobson said, which is, you really did the work for us. You made it really look complete. And it's easy to say this is the right choice based on a lot of reasons. So I don't want to disregard the work that was put in because I want to honor that. I just think from a political standpoint, and this is more for board operations than anything, is if you're going to give me choices, give me choices. If you're not going to give me choices, just say, hey, we looked at everything. nothing works. This is the one you need to go with. I'm cool with that. But I didn't get that from this presentation. That's all I'm saying. Sorry.
No, and I appreciate that, Trustee Land. I do want to say, you know, we looked at obviously a ton of options.
I see
And
that.
there were
I
a
do
lot of
see that.
not great options. And, you know, we looked high and low, move anything, do anything. And, you know, I do believe that the last four are viable options in terms of we could do them. But I do think that this one is, you know, a good distance away. But I very much appreciate your comments.
Well, and knowing the history, you know, that's the context that some of us had was talking with Superintendent Booker usually about, you know, what the conflict has been on both sides and, you know, what would be a win-win for both people, or both groups of stakeholders. I mean, that's ultimately what we need to consider is who are the ones using it, you know, and how is that going to affect them? So yeah, that's what I appreciate about this. So
Can I just say thank you?
yes,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't have any other comments to make. I just want to say thank you, Yancy, for such a well put together presentation, and we did receive other options that weren't less viable than these through the superintendent's through Superintendent Booker's Friday updates. Yeah, so thank you again for all your and your staff for all the work with this.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Dr. Sherman. Okay, do we need is this an action item? No, right?
No,
Great.
so
Okay.
our plan was either to get direction tonight or wait until December, what's
19th.
19th, is that the board meeting? December 19th. We can re-agendize this. If there's questions between now and then, you'd forward them to me, to Mr. Hawkins. We can get those answers to you. We can sit down with each of you individually, go over the plan even further. And then hopefully at the December meeting, we would get some kind of direction to push the timeline forward.
Great. Okay.
Thank you so much.
I have a question before we
Oh,
we
Trustee
leave.
Griffin, I'm
I mean,
sorry.
and this has to do with superintendent's comments. Is it possible maybe we could get maybe, and I don't know, I know we got a plan view, rectangles and circles and green and, you know, green and blue markers kind of deal. Is it possible maybe we could kind of refine street views and kind of give us a little better, if somebody's, you know, somebody there can take a napkin and kind of give us maybe a better idea of what it might
For a
look like
field
without
trip?
spending a lot of money.
We could do that, but we would probably have to engage QKA again. So I'd have to get back to the board to determine what I could get for the December board meeting. So maybe I can get that information to Superintendent Booker and he can get that out to the board members.
I think it's a viable option,
Yeah.
considering I think now that we're all in consensus, I think that's the direction you want to go in. I think it's more detailed is
Yeah.
better, you know,
Yeah.
because we can decide, you know, what's the investment and what does it look like, just the details.
Okay, so what I'm hearing then is that you'd like us to engage with an architect to flesh out this plan a little bit more in the hopes that it can be done between now and the December board meeting.
Yeah.
That's fingers crossed. That's
Yeah,
dependent on.
it may be the first meeting in January.
Correct.
with
I
that.
know. I'm
Yeah,
trying to hedge our bets on that one.
No, well, I think it's more likely than not the
Yeah.
January board meeting.
Yeah. And to bring some better elevations to you, so that we can move. I've been very cautious in not wanting to spend a lot of money on architectural design if the board was going to be like, no, we're going a different direction. Because, you know, architects are expensive and the work's expensive. But now that I'm hearing some general consensus, and we'll work toward that plan.
Yeah, we can do that.
Thank you.
All right.
But then formally, sorry, going back to Mr. Hawkins' timeline, when we're able to bring back those elevations, it would be at that point that we would ask for action so that we can engage in an RFP for architectural services and all those, because that's where the real expenditures come. Right? So that's when we would look for a real vote from the board.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
I mean, yeah, I wasn't asking for a detailed design or any, I mean, just
basic elevations. I get it.
yeah, just something to give us a sense of proportion, a plaza, you know, something with the red brick, because mostly it's just going to be the red brick veneer and some doors or something, but it's a better look than what we have now, and it might start to socialize now that we've talked about it, and hopefully we'll ponder the thing and it's not the final design or anything. It just gives us something on the blocks.
Yep. Fair enough.
Okay. Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go on to item 2, approval of schematic design. Is that right?
That's correct. So again, this is going to be Mr. Hawkins. This is an action item. I'm just going to cut to the chase.
Yep.
We're going to go through the classroom transformation project. This is a project that's funded by the Measure L bond.
Correct.
It's been in the works for a very long time. At the end of this presentation, this is an action item. We are going to ask that you consider approving the schematic designs as they are laid out in this presentation. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Mr. Hawkins.
All right. Thank you so much. I see I got a couple of our team members jumping on here. Real quick, just to give you some context around this project, I'm so excited to bring forward the schematic design for the classroom transformation project. This is the last major project of the Measure L bonds. We'll bring several smaller projects forward over the next couple of years, but this is the last major project. In fact, I spoke with our bond counsel about this project today with a question that a board member asked me around this project, and got obviously very good feedback. So I'm very proud. As this project was approved with the Measure L project list in December of 2020. It was initially envisioned to potentially start in the summer of 2028. And so interest rates and some really great work by our construction team and partners has actually been able to move up some of those projects. And if you go back and you look at the presentation from December of 2020, it was noted that this project would be done if remaining bond funds were available, because there were obviously worries that construction projects go over budget, and this as the last major project, we weren't even sure if the whole project could get done, or all sites, or maybe a full modernization. So I'm just incredibly excited to bring forward the project in its entirety, as well as some additional things that weren't even in the original approval or the envisioning of this project to help our students. In March of 2024, the board approved the contract with QKA, one of the board-approved architects in our bond. They designed the building that we're in right now. It's a beautiful building, but they approved them for this project. And tonight I have Mark Kotroki, lead partner. He is the Q of QKA on tonight. I believe that John Dibzak from QKA may be with us, or maybe joining us in a little bit.
So if John is online, could he raise his hand? I'm not seeing him on.
No worries.
There he is. Okay.
Awesome. We got John, another partner with QKA. And then Michael Estrada from Greystone West. Mark will be walking us through the schematic design with help from John. And then when we get into budget and schedule, Michael Estrada from Greystone West will walk us through budget and schedule. So with that, Mark, I'm really excited to turn it over to you to walk the board through the project and the process that we've been through.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. Thank you all for having us here today. I'm really particularly delighted about this. I thought about this. I've worked with the district for nearly 25 years on every single campus, but this is such a unique and rare opportunity for us to touch each learning environment in your school. So all of us here at QK are just delighted about this. Next slide, please. I'm going to, as Mr. Hawkins described, I'll walk us through some of the process and committee we work with, but really focus on some prototypes for the different classroom reconfigurations, and then I'll turn this over to Michael Estrada to walk us through the budgets and schedules. If I get the next slide, please. So I thought I'd start off with sort of what is in the project. This is a truly remarkable opportunity. It was first described to me as a refresh. We will refresh each of the classrooms, but the more we began to look at that, we're touching every surface, every material in every classroom and lab in the school. I couldn't help but really begin to think of this instead of just a refresh. This is truly a transformation. A teacher will leave in spring and come back into what they think would likely look like a brand new classroom because every surface they're going to see and touch will be new. So there are 420 odd classrooms and labs in the 6 comprehensive high schools. It's about a $90 million budget for the project. It's also important we recognize that the work is interior only. When you do something, you do it 420 times. So we have to be very mindful of staying within the classrooms to get the most value to be impactful to the classrooms. And then lastly, I'll describe the schedule in a bit more detail, but we're going to do this over the course of 2 summers. Next slide, please. I thought we'd start off with a diagram that we shared with the design committee that we worked with. We just, want to begin to sort of describe what sorts of areas one could do when you begin to look at transforming all these classrooms. So some of them are pretty straightforward and obvious. We would paint, provide window blinds. We'd replace, in nearly all the cases, the floor finishes and the base. But there's some significant things that we're getting to do that truly do transform these classrooms. A lot of the ceilings are very old suspended ceilings. They're stained and yellowed. All the tiles will be replaced. The light fixtures in virtually every one of these classrooms and labs will be replaced. A lot of these are old, energy inefficient fluorescents. We're putting in new, very good quality LED lights with the kind of right bulb temperature for classrooms. The lighting alone can make a giant change in classrooms. We're also removing these sort of long horizontal marker boards and using what we're seeing more and more in schools of these kind of marker walls where it's from floor to 7 feet, and you're sort of seeing it diagrammatically in the front of that classroom there. We're also enhancing the technology. Every classroom will have large video monitors, and then there's some other infrastructure, which I'll describe later. So you get a feel for the sort of every surface that that the classroom has will be altered. Next slide, please. But it's also equally important, as we described to the design committee, what's not included. We're not making structural changes. We're not doing a lot of mechanical or plumbing work, which really is fine because over the decades and over the years, we've done quite a bit on those topics. We're not changing out lab cabinets or door hardware. We're also not working just outside the classrooms. We're not working in the halls. And that again goes to trying to focus the efforts into the teaching spaces. We're not changing toilet rooms. However, the division state architect, and as described earlier, that's the state agency that reviews everything that we do. There will be some changes that will be required in some of the toilet rooms. We expect that to be minor. And that's because over the years, again, we've done a lot to improve the accessibility of the entire 6 comprehensive campuses. And then lastly, we're not repurposing spaces. If it's currently a classroom or currently a lab, it's staying that way. And that's precisely the way the committee wanted to do this. Then on the lower left, you can see we're dovetailing this with other projects. There's fire alarm, which could be an expensive part of this project, but fortunately that work is already underway. And there's an all-new public address system that we'll be integrating into that's also underway. Next, please. A little bit about our process. I mean, those of you who know us, we've always sort of prided ourselves in a very inclusive process to ensure that the school sites are involved. We started off up to this point with a committee of a representative of the schools and representatives of the districts and maintenance department and Greystone West, and kind of reviewed the scope of the project. What's possible? What could we do? And most importantly, what are their priorities? We've responded to the feedback we've received and updated, and so the material we're sharing today really does sort of reflect the considered opinion of all those members of the committee. We also ask those representatives of each of the school sites to be ambassadors and get feedback from them. So really what we're showing you today really is reflective of the input we've received from others. I do want to say also that pending approval today, our plan is to go to each site in a much larger teacher-focused meeting with very specific samples of the materials and colors that we're about to show you. I fully expect that there'll be some refinements in terms of which color we're using from the things we're about to show you. Next, please. So I mentioned that we're doing this over 2 summers. Summer of 26, the first 3 campuses, Aragon, Burlingame, and Cappuccino will be done. And then after that, the following summer will be Hillsdale, Mills, and San Mateo. And then as you'll see when you in the renderings I'm showing you, the first three, the significant amount of work that will occur during that summer. Next, please.
Real quick, just to jump
Please.
in, Mark. One of the reasons we chose the sequence that we did is that we're pairing our campus, Cappuccino with Mills, Burlingame with San Mateo, Aragon with Hillsdale, so that not both of those would be offline during any given summer, and both could act as the support, as the twin that they could use for induction or week of welcome, those kind of activities, athletics, et cetera, during that. But sorry, just back to you, Mark.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification. The next couple of photos are other projects of ours, but I thought it was useful when we talk about lights and when we talk about floor, window coverings, so we're all speaking the same language. As you see on the left, if there's currently a pendant light fixture, as some of the classrooms and labs have, we will replace it with a new but energy efficient LED pendant light fixtures. And we're seeing an example of what that looks like on the left. And these are wonderful sources of light, both direct and indirect. But the most important part about LEDs, aside from their energy efficiency, is the bulb temperature is a much brighter, much easier to, certainly softer on one's eyes, but also much easier. And just the changing of that light alone will change the classrooms. On the right is an example of there's many classrooms that have recessed light fixtures. We'll take out those yellowed lenses and awful looking and energy efficient fluorescents, and we'll be putting in these much better looking fluorescent fixtures. And you can also see what the ceiling tiles will look like as well. Next, please. This is just an example of the window shades. We don't use blackout curtains in the old days of 16mm projectors, because really these monitors that we're using don't require us blacking out the rooms. So there's still some ambient light, but they're also a dark enough shade that once they're closed, people can't see in. So they'll provide that kind of glare and heat protection in the classrooms when needed, but also when you do need to close the blinds for safety and security reasons, they will provide that same level of protection. There's just about every type and size of blinds in the schools. So changing these out to a uniform and all equally working manual blinds alone will be a big difference. Next, please. And then lastly, I mentioned the marker boards. I just want to show you some examples in a lot of the schools, even in elementary schools, but certainly in high schools, that we're doing these marker boards. The two left images show these. They're close to ground, up to 7 feet, and they're magnetic boards, the ability to hold things up. Teachers will have things there maybe during the course of the term, but also a place for students to present. They're really invaluable. The center one shows an example of how these monitors are. You'll see in a moment, we sort of lifted ours up from this photo, so we keep more of the board in use. So these are a really good example of the sort of kind of mental picture of what we're talking about. And then on the right is a good example of the tackable wall panels. I've always liked tackable wall panels because teachers get so much value from them, but they really also help improve acoustics, just like our ceilings will, but also an opportunity to provide another splash of color while, still allowing the teachers to use the rooms efficiently. So these are just some images. I want you to sort of have these in the back of your mind. Let's go to the next slide, please. This is the first of some interior renderings. What we've done is we've picked prototype classrooms in each of the schools. We obviously didn't render all 420 of them. We'd be here all night. But we wanted to get some prototypes to show you what these will look like. So we're going to start off with Aragon. I'll start off with the ceiling. We can see what a all new suspended ceiling tiles look like. Again, they're acoustically very appropriate. They're much brighter, so the light reflection, the ceilings will feel higher to teachers that come back into the classrooms for this reason alone. This particular classroom at Aragon has recessed light fixtures, so this is what our recessed LED light fixtures would look like. Clearly, the color is a strong part of the floor. So this is a rubber floor. It's a highly sustainable product, very easy to clean, readily renewable. But I've worked on Aragon for a long time, and that Aragon red is a big part of the pride of that school. And so the our design team felt like embracing this as part of the color within the teaching spaces. But then notice where the tack wall is, which is a refurbished tack wall, using more muted neutral color, and then the rest of the walls being left white, giving the teachers the opportunity to sort of provide their own life to those. So it's a really vibrant, exciting space, but still enough kind of muted other surfaces to provide calm in the classroom. And then on the right-hand side is a good example of what these teaching walls look like in all the labs and classrooms. You're seeing that magnetic floor to 7-foot marker boards, and you can sort of see how it would be used. See the monitor above it. The monitors will be both hardwired and wirelessly connected for teachers to use. So you can see sort of every surface within this classroom at Aragon has been touched. So everything will look new to the teacher that comes back. Next, please.
Just real quick to jump
please,
in,
go
I
ahead.
apologize, Mark.
No worries.
One thing I also wanted to note, and this is really based on feedback from our site principals and admin, as well as several board members, is when you're looking at the furniture in these classrooms, it's not the one-armed bandits that you're used to seeing when you come around our classroom, because of the work that this board has done in terms of being efficient and running the bond well. We had enough funding available to replace all of the classroom furniture district-wide. This furniture is, movable. You can move into groups, you can move into pairs, you can move into, is great for, the learning that our students are doing, and we're getting them ready for the world. And so this is an option of that. It would also include not just the furniture for the students, but presentation furniture for the teachers, as well as an updated teacher desk and some other miscellaneous furniture. Sorry, Mark. I'll turn it back over to you.
No. I really, actually, Mr. Huggins, I appreciate you bringing this up. When I'm asked about modernizing classrooms, but you of course are ahead of us on this. This is one of the first places we go is furniture, and you've done a marvelous job. And that photo of the teacher standing in front of that cart is a perfect example of the sort of wireless connection, but that cart allows that teacher to do that. So it's great. Next slide, please. Burlingame, we did do two images for because there's two completely different kinds of classes. This is the ones that I'll show you next are the 1920s neoclassical building, that beautiful main campus at Burlingame. That's so unique, we decided to render that separately. This is an example of some of the other buildings. So you can see the floor color we've picked here, and a little bit more muted, but then that allows us on the tackable wall panel to have a little bit more color. Again, the ceilings, in this case, it's still the recessed LED light fixtures and the new acoustical ceiling tiles. And then again, you're seeing the marker board as well as the monitor. There is a desk shown here. As I alluded to before, in every classroom, there will be a place where a teacher could connect wiredly with a wire, connect to the monitor, the data system. So if a teacher wishes to do that, that technology is still possible. However, we do have the wireless connections. The way, if you sort of look at modern pedagogy, teachers are moving about the classroom, and that ability to take a tablet or a laptop with them, but still control the monitor is a very powerful experience for them. Next, please. Then this is the lovely neoclassical building, the beautiful wood windows on the left. We're retaining as much of the trim in the classrooms as we can. We're certainly retaining those windows. You can see the blinds on them. This is an example. Look at the ceiling. Instead of a suspended ceiling, they're acoustical tiles. We're replacing them with all new. And then you see the pendant light fixtures, unlike the previous one I've shown you. These are simple, long light LED fixtures with an up and a down light component, which do a wonderful job of washing the ceiling and providing light. Then on the right-hand side, again, you see the marker board as well as the monitor, but also notice there's a second monitor. A number of your teachers have some interactive monitors where you can write directly on it, and it records that data or converts handwritten into type. And they're really a powerful tool that some of your teachers are using. I want you to know that we're not only providing for those, but all 420 of the teaching spaces you have are being prepared for this, so that should that technology come into more and more classrooms, we're not removing the marker boards or trying to run wires on the surface. All of this will happen. All of this will happen now, so that at any time, all that needs to be purchased is the interactive TV, and you'll be able to connect to it. All the rest of the wire technology, including this, will be hidden behind the walls, so none of this will ever be seen, but available in the future for the classrooms that wish to add that interactive monitor. And then next slide, lastly, we're using Cappuccino High School. I'm beginning to repeat myself so that you can see the ceilings and the monitor and the marker board. Here we're showing the interactive TV again. But what I did want to highlight is the flooring. This is the same updated rubber flooring that we're doing elsewhere that's sustainable and readily renewable, easy cleanable product. But as it comes in different colors and patterns, it also comes in these kind of wood grain, looks like a board floor. We'll review this with staff, see how they feel about this. But if you know Cappuccino, there are warm colors, there's actual woods there, and it just felt like such an interesting opportunity for their classroom. So we wanted to try this, but as I shared before, pending board approval, we plan on meeting with each of the staffs with the physical samples of each of these with alternatives to show them. These are our interior design team's best ideas. What we want to hear from them now is, in a greater group of each of the school sites, is how do you feel about these? What works, what doesn't work? So undoubtedly, these will be further refined before construction starts. But what's really nice about these, and I'm hoping you found value in these, you really get a feel, despite, the shade of gray may change or the pattern of the floor may change, these are completely transformed teaching spaces. Next, please. Next slide, please.
Sorry, Mark, I'm going to
yes.
jump in one more time.
Absolutely.
I
This is
apologize.
great. No.
One thing that we haven't noted, because it doesn't look pretty in pictures and things like that, that one of the ways we'll transform the classroom is by updating and modernizing the IT infrastructure. So the IT infrastructure behind the walls. That'll include fiber between the MDFs and IDFs. That may be looking at upgrading some of the Cat5 cables, maybe to Cat6. It's definitely looking at where our wireless access points are. Do we have enough, and replacing them with upgraded. So every one of our sites will also get updated IT infrastructure as part of this project. Back to you, Mark.
Great. I love this tag team. This is working great because I neglected to mention that. Lastly, and then I'll turn this over to Michael. Just some next steps is we'll be reviewing, pending approval, of course, we'll be reviewing our work, updating our set. There's always refinements to do. What you're not seeing are the dozens of pages produced and what will be hundreds of pages of drawings of us and our engineering team. We're getting ready for submission to the Division of State Architect. So we'll continue to coordinate that. We will work, as I mentioned, with the sites to ensure the finishes and the details that we're proposing work for them with physical samples and showing these renderings. And then our goal will be to submit to the Division of State Architect. They are a very lengthy review process in May of 25. But what's so nice about this schedule is, despite how long they are, we'll have plenty of time for their plan check. And then the Greystone team in the district will be able to bid the project and be able to do early procurement of all the materials so that when school ends in summer of 26, we will be ready to go and finish this work over the course of the summer. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Estrada.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you, trustees of the governing board. To start things off, as Mark mentioned, we're planning to start construction for Aragon, Burlingame, and Cappuccino in the summer of 2026. But that all starts tonight with the approval of the schematic design. If this is approved, we'll move into design development, and then the design development estimate and page turn, which will follow that. The construction documents will move into it immediately after, and that's all in preparation for the DSA submittal and DSA review process. We're aiming to be complete with that by the October of 2025. Along lines with that, we'll start the lease-leaseback and RFP process and getting a contractor on board. That starts with the board approval of the lease-leaseback method, aiming for January for that, and the contractor pre-qualifications. The lease-leaseback RFPs will go out in February, and then the interviews and ranking will carry through March. Board approval of lease-leaseback contract would aim for March for that. And then we begin the constructability review and contractor schedule. Following that, a little later down the lines is the subcontractor bidding. We're pending the DSA approval during that little lull you see there. So it's subcontractor bidding and getting the guaranteed maximum price contract established. After that's approved, we move on to submittals and procurement with the focus on the critical submittals and the long lead procurement ahead of construction for that summer. Again, construction would begin in May of 2026 through August 9th. That would be a very quick move out, a quick pattern for construction and moving back in first week of August in 2026. Next slide, please. Again, that was for Aragon, Burlingame, and Cappuccino. So moving on to Hillsdale Mills and San Mateo, we basically rinse and repeat the same process. Go back out for leaseback RFPs in September of 27 and 26, I'm sorry, and then move on to submittals procurement, same process again, construction for summer of 27. Next slide, please. And then moving into budget, we've got Aragon, Burlingame, and Cappuccino again set for 2026. The anticipated construction costs are what we're going to be putting forth towards the contractor. Soft costs and contingencies are your IORs, inspector of records. You've got your architectural fees, Greystone's fees. Moving on to furniture is the FF&E. The district's currently working with the consultant to get those designs in place. We've also added IT equipment allowance of $500,000 per site. That's for any additional equipment, switches and things that need to happen kind of behind the scenes to make sure that internet and everything's working up to speed. The proposed project cost for that is for Aragon, an example is $16,658,635. We've projected escalation at 5.5% through June of 26, giving your total proposed project costs. We have obviously proposed escalation at 5.5% through June of 2027 for Hillsdale Mills and San Mateo, so you see those reflected as well. There is a difference in cost by site that's just purely based on classroom counts. The total for all sites is 102 million, as you see there on the bottom right. And then the Measure L budget total is 106,200,000. Next slide. And just wanted to thank you all again for your time and allowing us to present.
All right. Thank you, QKA and Greystone team. With that, we are happy to, myself or the team is happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Student board reps, do you have any comments or questions? Yes.
So there was talk about replacing the classroom furniture, is that right?
Correct.
Would it be possible to advocate for detached desks and chairs? From experience during our what are they called? Earthquake. What are they called? Earthquake drills. The attached desks and seats are hard to fully cover students, and it doesn't account for the different heights and sizes of students. So I would really like for us to think about moving towards detached tables and desks.
Yeah, so that is the direction that the district and so I've met preliminarily with the maintenance staff as well as the principals of all sites, and they are in agreement with you to move. Now, there are obviously specific spaces that require specific science classrooms, some art classrooms, different things like that. We're just talking about, the 90% of classrooms. But yeah, that's what we're moving to. It also is much better to move those around the The current ones are very, very heavy, very difficult to move, hard to move into a group of 6, a group of 4, a group of 3, a group of 2. And our goal is to make that furniture flexible so that it can work in any classroom as well as any teaching model or as many teaching models as possible.
Thank you.
It's a great question.
I could consider this a bit of a design question, but I just kind of wanted to get this out there, and I don't know if it's possible to be changed or just reconsidered possibly from a student's input. But throughout the discussion of design of the classroom, you used words like modernizing and making all of the window cover blinds uniform. And so I saw with the walls in particular of all the classrooms, it seemed like there was emphasis on the tackable wall panels. Does that mean that on any walls that aren't tackable, you wouldn't be able to put like decorations or posters on it? Because I feel that classrooms are really a teacher's personal space and they really make it their own character.
I'm going to turn that over to Mark because I've heard his answer to this question. So Mark is our lead at QKA. So Mark, if you could let the group know.
You bet. Thank you for that. That's a really good question. And I wouldn't want to give that impression that only those surfaces could be tacked on. No, my wife until recently was a teacher too, and I'm fairly certain that there is no way that she would have only tacked onto tack walls. So it is everyone's intention that teachers will take over and individualize their classrooms as they should. Part of our work is trying to make a neutral color like the white color I mentioned to allow those teachers the freedom, whether they're posters or pieces of art, or the student work to be displayed. It's certainly our expectation that all those walls will be used. We just wanted to make sure we provided one regular tackable wall surface so that teachers that have many things that come up and down several times during the year can change.
Thank you.
Of course.
Okay. Sorry, I saw Trustee Jacobson had a comment.
Yeah, just a couple of things. So on the very first slide, it says that the construction budget is 90 million, which is a little bit of a discrepancy from the budget on the last slide that was 102.
Yeah, there's about $12 million of furniture
So
included. The furniture isn't included in the, that will be purchased outside of the construction contract. We won't contract with the general contractor to provide that. The furniture will be provided separately.
I see. And will the furniture be installed at the same time as all?
Correct.
Okay. All right. That was it.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else? Yes. Trustee Leon.
So totally changing the way I was earlier. I always thought this is amazing because Mark said it really well. It's like, this is the learning center. This is where it's all taking place. To actually have this part changed and upgraded and modernized and made to what it should be is important. It's critical because it's where the teaching takes place, where the learning takes place. So, and I'm glad for the students' input. I think that's awesome. So I'm glad they had their input because I think it's important. So I just wanted to make sure. So just thank you. This is awesome. I think it's really what we need to do. So thank you, Mark and Mike and Yancey for all that. I do want to ask, there was that detail, like you're giving us examples of samples of shades and stuff, but you're still going to be talking with committees at the sites to really kind of make the final answers to things, right?
Correct. If the board approves the schematic design tonight, what we did is we worked with all campuses to talk about what was going to happen kind of on all campuses and to get some general examples of what that was going to look like. If the board approves that tonight, we met with a few representatives from each school. If this is approved tonight, QKA will now go meet with larger representative groups on each campus to say, does this feel like Aragon's campus? Does this feel like Cappuccino's campus? Does this, and they'll bring the actual samples. Because sometimes what it looks like on the screen and when you look at it in an actual sample, your eye sees it differently. And so absolutely that this will go back to the site committees. But we wanted to get the scope and the schedule approved before we went back to those sites to start getting into that detailed work.
Perfect. Last question. I didn't see science rooms, labs. Is that going to be changed or not changed? Is that part of the deal or?
Yes.
Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, and I recognize that we could have modeled at least one of the science classrooms, and that was an oversight on our part. Yes, all the science labs and similar sort of classroom spaces will also be done as part of this project.
Okay.
Yeah.
And consulting with the teachers.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
I will
Absolutely.
note that there will be a few classrooms where we don't necessarily get new furniture. So all of our regular classrooms, absolutely. But there's definitely some of our specialty classrooms that may have gotten furniture in the last 3
Year
to
or
5
two,
to
yeah,
10
yeah.
years, and that really love that. And then we have a couple of programs, some especially art programs that may really love, the butcher block tables that they have. But, we're going to go in and basically, offer, but they may say, no, wait a minute, this is,
Got it.
this is 40-year, 50-year furniture. We're incredibly happy. We don't want
Yeah.
anything different.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
I think Representative Pantua had something. Go ahead.
Building off of Trustee Land's inquiry about the shades and stuff of the classroom and the flooring, coming from a student perspective who also comes from a school that reps red as one of our school colors, I personally think that having it as the color of the flooring would be incredibly distracting because at Mills we have like lots of really bright red and yellow like walls already that make it really hard to concentrate because it's just like screaming in your eyes and you can't really focus on what's on in front of you on your desk.
That's great feedback. I think that's why that'll go back to
Yeah.
the teaching staff
Mhm.
and the educators and potentially some student reps to
Yeah.
be able to give that feedback as we move forward, and that'll be invaluable feedback to finalize those colors and those some of those design features.
One of my suggestions was going to be to engage our board reps to give input as well, depending on what site they're at, because again, right, they use the classrooms as well. So yeah, thank you for your input. I have a couple suggestions, well, I guess questions and suggestions. So I really like universal design when it comes to new buildings and new designs and things like that. I saw that on the slides you had talked about accessibility. In terms of accessibility, is it going to stay just to the basic ADA requirements, or can we go a little further, being that, it shows that we care. On slide 5, it looked like it said, I think it was slide 5, that the doorknobs and cabinet knobs, I believe, would not be changed. But if that's part of accessibility, then would that be included as well?
I think I can
Yeah,
answer
Mark,
that.
go ahead. Yeah,
great.
absolutely.
Yeah, no, really good question. First off, what's interesting about public schools, unlike commercial and other work that architects do, and our firm only does public schools, we're held to a higher standard than the general public is. So those you're absolutely right about universal design and just the simplest of things like accessible door hardware. That all has been done. So we already have fully accessible doors. If we didn't, you're quite right. We would be required to, and if we weren't required to, we would have done it on our own. If we found a door with a conventional old-fashioned doorknob, those would most definitely be replaced. But fortunately, because over the decades, the district has done so much work, many of those accessibility improvements, particularly toilet rooms, access into the rooms or into the building, as you well know, access to parking spaces, drinking fountains, all those sorts of improvements, many of them have been done. So we're fortunate that we're able to focus in on the classrooms and there's not as much accessibility required. But if we come across it, absolutely it'll be done.
Yeah, well, and there are still some ADA issues that I've encountered. I am a power chair user, and for example, like the weight of the doors extremely heavy.
Yeah.
Sometimes we cannot, like I couldn't open the door on my own. I'd get pulled out of my chair. I guess the way that the door swings open and closed is often way too quickly. Even with drinking fountains and things like that, they're not accessible. So I don't know if there's a way of consulting with somebody that, could give you a little bit more input. I appreciate that, that educational spaces are held to a higher standard. That's excellent. But, even then, I think there might be some things that might, could be improved. I don't want to increase cost, but I mean, if it means for the future, like
Yeah.
the investment in the community and showing that we do care, that's really important. Even push buttons maybe at the bottom of some doors, like the Ed Roberts campus in Berkeley, which is not an I guess it is somewhat of an educational space. That's a great example of how useful universal design is in educational spaces, I guess. So I don't know. I'm adding to it, but it's important. So thank you.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I just want to share, you're right also that a good example is the force used to open a door is difficult for some, and we face the issues of, is it blown open? Because it's so I think you're shining a light on, I think, some inconsistencies in the code and how sometimes they're implemented to meet code requirements, but still don't meet the spirit of what's intended, which is universally accessible spaces. So I share that and appreciate you bringing it up.
Thank you, but I appreciate that the desks and stuff won't be more universal.
Yep.
That must be really tough.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yep.
Mhm. Great. Anybody else? Does anybody have any other comments or questions? Okay, and this is an action item, right?
This is an action item, and tonight, the board is being asked to approve the schematic design, which is the general design of the project, the schedule, as well as the budget. The funding source is Measure L. We still are within our original Measure L budget, and we haven't gone into our contingency at all, even with this entire project and adding on the scope of the furniture, which was not in the original scope of the project when it was approved in December of 2020. So we're incredibly excited. One of the reasons we were able to do that is, as you noted, the original project was scheduled for 2028. And we've been able to move forward, save some of that escalation cost, and take some of that escalation cost, move that into additional scope, in this case, the furniture for the classrooms. So we're really excited.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have one last question.
Yeah.
In terms of materials, are you foreseeing like maybe any issues with getting materials and just with the situation we have right now?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a great question. We initially had hoped to we were really trying to speed this up, and we were potentially looking at a 2025, 2026 as the earliest we could possibly do it. And we were potentially working towards a schedule of that. And then really as we got there, and the importance of understanding that this is every classroom on all of our campuses.
Project.
And this is a summer project. And we need to get those teachers in the first week of August. This is going to be a screamer. We need all of the procurement done, ready to go, first day, ready to go. So that's why when you saw those really long bars in terms of RFPs and procurement and all those, that was because we're basically starting, about a year early to ensure all of those things are going to be in the best position.
Cool. Thank you. All right. With that said, thank you for an amazing presentation. This is really neat.
Yep.
Can I have a motion?
I make a motion to approve the schematic design, budget, and schedule for the district-wide classroom transformation project.
Okay, motion by Trustee
And
Leonard,
I'll second that.
second by Trustee
I
Chang.
also want to say thank you for the presentation.
Of course.
Awesome.
Okay, Trustee Griffin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Trustee Land,
Aye.
Trustee Jacobson,
Aye.
Trustee Chavez,
Aye.
and I vote aye. Motion carries. Thank you. I know I went out of
Thank you.
order. I apologize.
Okay. No worries.
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna move a little quickly because it's 10:20. Oh, we need to see, what is it, 10 o'clock, right? If we would like a break or keep going?
Let's keep going.
Keep going? Okay, I need a motion.
I make a motion to keep going.
Okay,
I second that.
okay, motion by trustee Land, second by trustee Chavez. Trustee Griffin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Trustee Land,
Aye.
trustee Jacobson,
Aye.
trustee Chavez,
Aye.
and I vote aye. Okay, we will keep going. Division of Human Resources.
Yes, the personnel action, the personnel consent has the personnel actions and two MOUs and 5 job descriptions. If you have any questions, or otherwise we can approve them all at once.
Okay. Are there any questions from the board? No, sorry, any public comment?
There are none.
Okay. All right, can I have a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by trustee Chavez and a second by trustee Land. Trustee Griffin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Trustee Land,
Aye.
trustee Jacobson,
Aye.
trustee Chavez.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Motion carries. Sorry, I'm going slower because we have our interpreters. Good. Okay, Mr. Black.
Okay, the first item on the regular agenda is the personnel actions addendum, and there aren't any special recognitions tonight.
Excellent. Okay. Any questions or comments from the public?
There are none.
How about from the board? Okay. All right, I would like a motion.
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by trustee Chavez, second by trustee Land. Trustee Griffin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Trustee Land,
Aye.
trustee Jacobson,
Aye.
trustee Chavez.
Aye.
I vote aye. Motion carries. Okay, number 2.
Number 2 is the approval of a contract for our general manager. Kevin Sanchez was promoted to the position of general manager of facility use, and we need to orally read out the compensation terms, and I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the public?
There are none.
Questions or comments from the board? Okay. Can I have a motion?
He needs to read
Oh,
it out.
sorry. Go
Would
ahead.
you
and
like me
read
to
it
read
out loud.
those out?
Yes.
Okay,
There
the
might be
sa-
questions after he reads it, but yeah, please.
Okay, so the following are the compensation terms for Kevin Sanchez, General Manager of Facility Use. Salary will be $92,996. That is based off an annualized salary of $154,527 for 221 workdays. There'll be health and welfare benefits of up to $33,551.90. There'll be transportation and cell phone reimbursements of $275 a month. And there'll be various subscriptions and memberships and reimbursements of approved district expenses.
Great. Thank you. I need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by trustee Land, second by trustee Chavez. Trustee Griffin, how do you
Aye.
vote? Trustee Chavez?
Aye.
Trustee Jacobson?
Aye.
Trustee Land?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Motion carries. Number 3.
Number 3 is a public hearing for the district's Sunshine Reopener proposal with the Adult School Federation of Teachers. If we could
Okay.
hold a public.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from?
We're gonna.
Oh, we have to
have
open
to
up the
close,
public
yeah,
hearing. Thank
yeah.
you. All right. Are there any questions or comments from the public?
There are none.
Questions or comments from the board? No. Okay. We'll now close the public hearing. All right. Thank you. Keep going.
Okay, the next item is the district's proposal or Sunshine proposal for reopeners for the Adult School Federation of Teachers for 24-25. We have a very well-functioning contract, and so we're only opening up the salary and benefits, which are mandated open articles, and no others.
Great. Thank you. Any public comments?
There are none.
Comments or questions from the board? Okay. I need a motion.
I make a motion to approve the Sunshine proposal.
Okay.
I second.
We have a motion by trustee Land and a second by trustee Jacobson. Trustee Griffin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Trustee Chavez?
Aye.
Trustee Jacobson?
Aye.
Trustee Land?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Number 5.
The last item is the athletic manual. We revise this yearly. The revisions, there's not too many revisions this year. They include the change in the athletic probation for 12th grade students. That's due to their ability now to take 4 classes down from 5. And the other changes, besides routine, like updating the maps and such, are the heat index and the new concussion language. And I think those are pretty much the significant ones. The rest are pretty routine.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from the public?
There are none.
Questions or comments from the board? Okay, trustee Griffin, or I'd like to.
I make the motion to approve.
Second.
This is the time of the night when my brain turns the motion.
I know, let's just keep going because I got to get to bed.
We have a motion by trustee Chavez and a second by trustee Land. Trustee Griffin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Trustee Chavez?
Aye.
Trustee Jacobson?
Aye.
Trustee Land?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Excellent. That was the last one. Okay, it doesn't look like we have anything for student services or instructional services.
Correct.
Division of Business Services, Mr. Hawkins.
On the agenda is the 7th and hopefully last amendment to our purchase and sale agreement of the Crestmore School Site to Summerhill Homes. It has 2 main items. The first is allowing for the demolition of the current site starting in December, but pending a demolition permit from the city of San Bruno, as well as certain protections, including a performance bond and insurance. The second is for a commemorative plaque to be added to the site, noting that it is the former home of Crestmore High School and potentially having some information about Crestmore High School and the great things that were done there.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments from the public?
There are none.
Questions or comments from the board? Okay, I'd like a motion.
I make a motion for the 7th Amendment.
I second.
Motion by trustee Land, second by trustee Chavez. Trustee Griffin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Trustee Chavez?
Aye.
Trustee Jacobson?
Aye.
And trustee Land?
Aye.
I vote aye. Motion carries. Okay, now the last item is board operations. Do we have anything? Oh, approval of the updated board policy. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
What's this one?
These are updates to have some better language to support our ML students. It provides newcomer students with proficiency for native language. It aligns to UC requirements. It removes some vague language, and then it also allows for students who attend language schools for core or language classes that we don't offer to get credit for those courses.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Oh, from the public first.
There are none.
From the board? Okay. Motion.
I make a motion to approve Board Policy and Administrative Regulation 6146.11.
I second that.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion by trustee Land and a second by trustee Chavez. Trustee Griffin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Trustee, sorry, I lost my place. Trustee Chavez?
Aye.
Trustee Jacobson?
Aye.
Trustee Land?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Motion carries. Now the last one would be our board items for the next meeting. We have career technical education, board governance, handbook, and self-evaluation. Is there anything else that we want to include? Okay.
Also, just a reminder, we have a board study session on December 11th, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. here on the budget.
Thank you. Well, that I'm seeing nothing, we will adjourn. Thank you.